Good afternoon. The date is July 9th. The time is 5:04 p.m. And I hereby call to order the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board of the City of Groveland. Thank you for joining us for the city's P&Z Board meeting. On behalf of myself, the Vice Chair, all board members and staff, we hope you and your families are well. All votes will be received by roll call vote. For board discussion, I will call on each board member individually to avoid members talking over one another. We will also be taking public comment during the meeting as well. At this time, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Chair Zach Decker.
Present.
Vice Chair Robin Hoover.
Present.
Board Member Carrie Lambert is absent. Board Member Alicia Kissy.
Present.
Board Member Michael Archer.
Present.
Board Member Marty Proctor.
Present.
Board Member Brandon Dixon is absent. Non-voting member Bill Mathias. We have Kelly Randall, who will be updating us this afternoon in his place. Interim Community and Economic Development Director Andrew Landis is absent. And we have our city attorney from Fishback. Could you please state your name?
Kurt Garber.
Okay. And then Recording Secretary Maria Ramirez present.
Thank you, Maria. We do have a quorum. At this time, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this time, Maria, will you please read the consent agenda item?
Consideration of approval for the May 7th, 2026 Planning and Zoning Board meeting minutes.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are we doing this by roll call? Yep, we're going to call this. Okay. Vice Chair Robin Hoover.
Aye.
Board Member Alicia Kissy.
Aye.
Board Member Michael Archer.
Aye.
Board Member Marty Proctor.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. All right, we do not have any new business, so we'll be moving to presentations. Our first presentation will be from Lake County Public Schools, an update from Kelly Randall, Executive Director of Facilities and Planning.
Good evening. Good evening. I was actually a little afraid I was going to be late and have to listen to your ear update on your transportation. So I'm glad I made it in time. The traffic on 19, by the way, if you're going that way, almost completely backed up. So yeah, it's a little crazy out there. But thank you again for having me here to talk about, what we're seeing for Lake County schools and more specifically for the Groveland schools. I think you're aware that we finished our capital project at Groveland Elementary School that consisted of some safety enhancements. They got new playgrounds, new restrooms in their cafeteria, and just kind of an assortment of things that make it function a little bit better. So that project was completed early last school year. And I haven't heard any complaints, so that's kind of my bar at this point. Did I hear any complaints? So I guess it went well. As far as other things that are coming up, I did receive some questions from one of the members, so I'll just go ahead and address those. There was a question about how maintenance requests from our schools are currently tracked and what the average turnaround for repairs is. We do have a pretty robust work order system, and so that's how we receive work orders and how they're tracked as well. Generally, excluding emergencies, the turnaround time is 7 days if it's a fairly routine issue. But generally, they aim for 72 hours. So that's our maintenance benchmark, and they generally are pretty good about doing that unless it's something that's more complicated, takes parts, that kind of thing. And then there was a question about how we're prioritizing backlog maintenance. And so, that is generally based on comfort of our students and staff, safety issues, and then anything that improves the learning environment, right? So if we have backlog lighting issues, obviously we're going to address those before we address a flooring issue or something like that, right? Because well, there's a lot of different degrees of that, right? So flooring, if it affects indoor air quality, we're going to prioritize that. But lighting obviously affects the learning environment as well. So we're working through, we still have backlog maintenance, right? We had a long period of time where the school board was not receiving a lot of revenue. And so, and we also had built a lot of schools about 20 to 25 years ago. And so those schools are kind of reaching the end of their life cycle. So we're working through that. As we have extra funding, we're prioritizing backlog maintenance for that, HVAC repairs or replacements, updating systems, and that kind of thing as we go. We've got a big project we're going through and doing LED lighting updates on almost all of our schools because, first of all, it helps our bottom line, right? But it also helps our learning environment. They're brighter classrooms, kids can see better, you don't have that buzzing from old fluorescent lights. And so that's one of the major projects that we're kind of working through. And so, there's a lot of different things that we're doing in that kind of thing. Here specifically in Groveland, at Cecil Gray, our maintenance department has added a new chiller. They have replaced the auditorium lighting. They've replaced flooring in the media center and in restrooms. That was an investment of about $700,000. And, they're not exciting things, but they're things that make a difference, right? And also, we had our project at Groveland Elementary that my department, facilities did, but maintenance has also done upgrades on their HVAC systems. They've replaced their lighting, and they've done flooring and painting projects. And at South Lake High School, we're replacing flooring. We're doing soffit work. Again, not very interesting, but it makes a big difference. We're improving lighting on the exterior of the buildings. That's a safety issue. We're adding covered walkway canopies, and we're currently working to replace the football stadium lights. That's a big project, and they'll have much more energy efficient, much better lighting on the football stadium when they're done with that. And then if you're a softball fan or a tennis fan, you might have noticed that there's a new restroom and concession stand building at South Lake High School. That was kind of a fun project. The district funded it and supported it, but it was actually managed largely by the Construction Academy there. So the students had the opportunity to do hands-on learning while they were out there. It was also supported by a lot of the local contractors, and so we were able to fund it. We did save a little bit because contractors donated labor. The kids obviously did some work on it, and so it's a great new building. If you're out there, if you want to go to a softball game, they'd be happy to have you. There was a question about if there was anything affecting the 5-year work plan. We're working on that right now. It goes before the board in August for adoption. I will say it's largely just a roll forward from last year. There are some changes. If you watch the news, you might have heard about the changes that we've doing to consolidate Carver Middle School and Oak Park Middle School. rather than our original plan was to consolidate Oak Park and the adjacent Leesburg Elementary School into a K-8. Our teaching and learning department and actually the schools came together and said, we don't think this is the best thing for the students. For a K-8, you can't offer the same kind of variety of courses that you can at a full middle school. And so we are actually consolidating those. It's a capital project at Carver Middle, and we'll move those students over next summer from Oak Park Middle to Carver Middle. And then Leesburg Elementary School will actually get an addition. They have a lot of portables at that school, so we'll be doing a classroom addition there. So that is the one big change in our capital plan moving forward. So otherwise, we just kind of keep moving forward with the sales tax projects. As I said, where we have funding, additional funding, we're using that to address backlog maintenance. We see that that is really a big issue for us, especially as these buildings age. And so that's a priority. Other things, I will say from a planning standpoint at the school district, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So there have been a lot of changes at the legislative level. The expanded voucher programs, the emphasis on charter schools, those are all kind of affecting our enrollment. And so we're just kind of adjusting. We're always looking at our projects and seeing, okay, is this still something that's a viable project? Do we need to look at it slightly differently, like we did with our Oak Park, Leesburg, Carver project. And so we'll be kind of assessing those as we go. You know, if you watch the news, there for a while, everybody was talking about school closures. Lake County is not quite in the same position as some of our adjacent counties, right? We had a very conservative board. We still have a very conservative board. They have been pay-as-you-go for about 15 years, which meant that we had to have the cash in order to build any new project. And so unlike some of our local governments or local school boards, we did not overbuild capacity, right? There's not a lot of extra capacity in Lake County, and where we did or where we do have extra capacity, it is largely in portables, which, you know, we're trying to get rid of. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. We have a mandate to share funding with charter schools, and so that affects our ad valorem, which is actually our most flexible money. That's the money that we use for maintenance, for buses, for computers, for all of those kinds of things. And so, you know, we're sharing that with the charter schools, and they're using that as well, but it does kind of affect what we can do as we move forward. There's also, I don't know if you've been following, but there's a Schools of Hope legislation, which basically says that if we have excess capacity, then a charter school could come in and create a School of Hope within our school. Largely at the district's expense. And so that is one of the things that we follow very closely. I will say, again, because we don't have a lot of excess capacity, then it hasn't probably hit us quite as hard as it has some schools. I know like Miami-Dade and Broward, they are facing a lot of pressure from that. And everybody's kind of trying to figure out how that's going to work. Hopefully it'll be a while before Lake County gets to that point, but we watch that. All right. So there was a question about, and I'm not totally sure I understand this one, but it was Groveland Elementary capital project carryover. If we have money left over from any of our projects, basically that goes in to be reallocated to future projects. So it was at your question, Ms. Hoover? Okay. And so that's basically, it goes in, it gets reallocated. And that's true for any of our projects. Hopefully, we always have money left at the end, and we can wrap that into something else. And then there was a question about school capacity and enrollment forecasts. I will say that gets very interesting, right? So right now, because of the expansion of the charter program, of charter schools and the expansion of the voucher programs at the state level, then we are not seeing what 5 or 10 years ago we would have expected to see from growth. right? So there is growth in the area, but there's a whole lot of factors that are leading to that, keeping our enrollment stable or actually leading to a decrease in enrollment. So for the Groveland schools, we are expecting to see next year, we're expecting to see Groveland Elementary's population drop. We are also expecting to see Cecil Gray's population drop. The high school actually continues to grow, but that is as much a factor of, there's not charter high schools in the district. And so when students leave the charter schools, they come back to high schools here in Lake County, or traditional high schools. It's interesting because the projections that we have actually show the elementaries and the middles actually recovering slightly in about the third year. So I think that's 28, 29. We'll see whether that actually continues, whether that actually happens. That could be a factor of, just an increase in a birth rate. I'm not totally sure what exactly is leading to that, but we'll see. It'll be an interesting trend if it does do that. Generally, there is plenty of capacity at Groveland Elementary and at Cecil Gray. At South Lake, we have been reliant on portables. We do have the high school, we call it high school CCC, in the Wellness Way area. And so that will actually lead to an entire boundary change shift and relieve all of the three South County high schools, all of which are at or slightly over capacity. And so, so that is actually programmed. It is funded in last year's fourth year, so either the third or fourth year. We're still struggling with finding a site there. So if anybody has 60 to 80 acres in the Wellness Way area that they would like to sell us, we are buying. But we're got that programmed in the 5-year capital plan, and then when that actually opens, then we'll relieve all of those schools through attendance boundary adjustments. As far as Groveland-specific projects in the 5-year plan, oh, sorry, you actually had 2030 to 2035, so that's farther out. We don't have anything specific. We are keeping a very close eye on kind of that North Groveland, I always call it, I need a good acronym for it, but I always call it that North Groveland, South Leesburg, West Howey area. That's a high growth potential area, and so we're constantly looking for sites there and just talking to developers, trying to figure out how we're going to address that at full build out for that area. I mean, it's partially Groveland, partially Leesburg, partially Howey and unincorporated Lake County, but we actually project a full feeder pattern. So basically a high school, a middle school, and 3 elementary schools for all of that growth. Now, that's a long way down, right? So there's growth coming, there's a lot of entitlement work, but we're not necessarily seeing the building quite yet. So I will say, generally, we have always said 20, 40, 80, right? So 20 for an elementary, 40 for a middle school, 80 for a high school. We have built on smaller parcels. So our latest elementary school site that we've acquired is 15 acres. At a middle school, we've built, they're basically the same as a K-8, so about 35 acres. And then Lake Minneola High School is on 60 acres. It's a little bit tight, but honestly, in Wellness Way, we are looking for anything we can get. So like, if we can find a good solid 50 acres, we would probably take it. It's more comfortable at 80 acres. South Lake is way over 80 acres. But, and it also depends a lot on whether we can get off-site stormwater storage, whether we can get some kind of off-site stacking. Obviously, if we go vertical to 2 stories, 3 stories for a high school or a middle school, then, you can build on a smaller piece of property. So we're always kind of factoring all of those in when we evaluate land. One of the things as a planner, again, that makes me nervous is that there is a push on the state level for school boards to divest ourselves of vacant land. And so that makes long-range planning difficult, right? If you can't say, oh, I'm going to have this piece of property in 5 or 10 years, I'm still not totally sure how you plan for that. So that's a conversation we're constantly having with the state whenever it comes up, that, you know, you can't plan if you can't keep your property. So anyway, those are my responses to the questions that I had. So if there's anything else that you have, I would be happy to talk some more.
I'm curious, you mentioned the portables a few times. Are those a lease arrangement, or does the board own those?
So it varies. So some are leased and some are owned. And I will say, in response to the Schools of Hope, one of the things that we're doing, we used to, if we owned it, we would just kind of leave it, even with the school wasn't fully utilizing the portable, we would just leave it on site there in case they needed it, or sometimes they would use it for like PE or something like that, right? So we just leave it there. It was kind of gave them a little bit of elbow room. We are evaluating all of those. So if there are portables that are really underutilized, or using them for storage, you know, depending on their condition, we have been divesting ourselves of those units. If they're leased, obviously, and they're underutilized, we're going to send them back and save ourselves that lease payment. If we own them, then we kind of balance, okay, is there a viable use for this at the school? What's the condition? How much is it costing us in maintenance? And, you know, if it comes down on this side of the scale, then we're likely to get rid of them.
And you said it's a pay-as-you-go structure, so is it safe to assume that those are all owned outright? We're not carrying debt?
Portables always, yes.
Okay.
If we're leasing them, obviously, we have a lease agreement, we're paying, you know, monthly rent. But we own all of those portables. I will say all of the ones that we own, there are a few that we bought in the 2000s, but it has been quite a while since we have actually purchased a new portable. So they're mostly, you know, the state actually says that the life cycle of a portable building is 20 years. And so most of our portables are far over that, that time. We have bought there's a few where, like bus depots, we've been replacing their offices with portable buildings. We've actually done a few. There's a early childhood learning center, which is not a daycare. It's an important distinction, but it is, it's where they, you know, they have kids come in, they do an early childhood learning thing for the teenagers at the high school. And so we've actually just replaced, at Eastridge High School, we've just replaced theirs with a new, bigger portable, basically. So we own some newer ones, but the vast majority of them are far over 20 years old. Mostly 96 and earlier.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's old. Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have comments or questions for Ms. Randall?
Of course. First of all, good luck finding a new Hall of Famer to be your superintendent.
She is going to be missed tremendously.
Yes.
It's been an honor to work for her.
Yeah, you've had a superstar for a long time. You're doing some exterior lighting changes. If I want to get some dark sky information into your organization, is that through you?
If you want to get wet.
Dark sky lighting information to you for exterior lighting?
Yeah, you can send that to me, and we can share it with maintenance. I will say risk management also plays into that. So there are certain foot candles that we are required to have.
All of that has to
Yeah.
be the case. Yeah, this is just
Yeah.
guidelines for compliance. Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate you taking that on. And thank you for coming.
Of course. Anybody else? All
Well, thank
right.
you so much for your
Well,
presentation and for being
Thank
here
you.
today.
It's always a pleasure. And All right, thanks. Have a great night.
Right, at this time, we will have an EAR update presentation from TJ Fish and Rich Niles on utilities levels of service.
So before we start, good evening, Chair Decker, Vice Chair Hoover, and Planning Zoning Board members. My name is Alan Booker, Senior Planner with the City of Groveland. So we're just going to begin with a small introduction, a recap for anybody also watching us online. And then we're going to move into, like we said, to the utilities first, followed by transportation. Oh, well, here it is. It's not moving. So just a quick recap, what is an EAR? So every 7 years, each local government shall evaluate their comprehensive plan to determine if any amendments are necessary. So in our case, you want to look at the latest conditions. You want to make sure the policy in alignment with the state statute, and the plan must be at least a 10-year horizon, and you have to update your population, update your maps. We're in 2026, so the projected for 2036 will be around 38,173 people in the city of Groveland. And then 2046, we could be looking at 46,900 people. So we have a lot of growth. So we have to see how we can better manage it. So in Groveland, our process is slightly different. We've also been using our strategic plan to inform the priorities of the comprehensive plan. We've done a lot of public engagements to gather community inputs. We've received direction from city councils and staff as well, consultants. We've been doing analysis to perform those updates. So like in April 17 was the last day we had a consultant that was helping with us. Now we're carrying this in addition to our regular workload. So we're still going through all the chapters. We've been, like we said, we had encountered some inconsistencies with our future land use map and zoning. So we've been documenting exactly what's happening with the future land use map and actually making the recommendations, and it's something eventually we'll bring forward to Planning Zoning Board and Council to get your recommendations on the changes. Our comprehensive plan, like I said, is using our strategic plan to inform the priorities. And what you're going to see in the upcoming, our chapters now, we're going to have at least try to tie to at least one objective that's in the strategic plan to see how it's getting carried out in each chapter, if it's housing or utilities. And there's also going to be a little chapter that says, here's what we heard in the communities, this is what we're doing to address it, and discuss briefly what each chapter is about. And so tonight we're going to be talking about level of service, so obviously which matters a great deal. Last time we talked about public safety with fire and police, and tonight we're going to talk about utilities and transportation. So obviously if you increase the level of service, that can lead to more expenses on the community. So tonight we're going to take this opportunity, like I said, to discuss utilities, and Rich Niles and TJ from Public Works and Transportation Director is going to go over our level of service, what it means, and where we go from there. So I will let Rich know if you want to come up, or TJ. So, this is the one.
Hello, everybody. Planning and Zoning Board members, TJ Fish, staff. Overall infrastructure, so right now the department's transportation and public works, but I consider it, it's the infrastructure department and a lot of operations too, streets and stormwater facilities and fleet. So I say that because I want you to be familiar with how the city is structured. There's a few of you I have routinely interacted with. We've gone to Tallahassee before. Marty, I know from the Water Authority and the MPO committee. Robin comes to many, many meetings, strategic planning. Zach and I talk pretty regularly, getting to meet a couple of you for the first time. But I'm TJ, I'm accessible, and I get very enthusiastic about infrastructure. So I say that we're going to do two things tonight. I've got two expert consultants that have been serving the city for some time. We'll jump into transportation in a few minutes. And to give you a quick preview about transportation, we're going to share with you some realities about transportation that will inform you, educate you, and also frustrate you about how state law in Florida works when it comes to transportation and concurrency. However, I'm very excited that when it comes to utilities and water and sewer specifically, we're all about concurrency and using that as a growth management tool. And I want to talk about what that really means. I think Jeremiah is in the background. Yep. He's behind the curtain there. He's going to pull up the map. And I wanted to point out, this is our utility service area. It's within that boundary. And he's doing some zooming in, and I might be able to manipulate it here with the mouse potentially. We'll see. But the point being is we have almost 60 square miles that are part of two things. It's the interlocal service boundary agreement that is the framework of the comp plan where you're able to annex as a city, the future land use designations can be applied, the zoning can be applied. However, it also is under state chapter 180 of state statutes as our utility service area. So it's a double-edged sword. And I'm saying this up front on purpose as we jump into level service that you would think that if you don't want any growth and you're running out of capacity at your water plant or your sewer plant, let's just not build any more. Let's not build any more capacity. Let's not do anything. That way the growth won't happen. Turns out in Florida, that's not really the way it works legally. And one of the challenges for any municipality is that a lot of the underlying lands are still in Lake County. So if it's been annexed, there's already an obligation to serve. And that's important to keep in mind. It's created a reason for us to plan because in that utility service area, if there's water or sewer issues and the city doesn't have capacity, we either have to have a plan of how we're providing that capacity or we lose the right of first refusal and then be able to go, the developer may be able to go their own way, whatever that means. And it could be as simple as, well, we'll just change our densities and do wells and septic tank, or we'll go to Lake County. If they're already in the city, they can't go to Lake County. But I will say that's a struggle if the property's not been annexed yet, and we tell them we don't want what they're proposing, they go to Lake County to try to get it approved anyway, and then we say, well, we're not serving you because we don't have capacity. It's kind of a strategic tool. And then we have to fight it out. But if you're already in the city, there's an expectation the city's going to serve. So there's a large tract of land hypothetically in the city that's already annexed and already zoned, and it's a lot of acres, which we're looking at that exact scenario on the screen. And they come in to develop, and we say, I'm sorry, we don't have capacity right now. We can negotiate. We can talk about what their financial contribution is going to be and impact fees and all those things. But for us to say we don't have a plan, that's unacceptable under state law. So the good news is we do have a plan, and I'm giving you a framework tonight because I don't want to hit you with a fire hose, because between what we're about to tell you on utilities and then transportation, it's a lot. So we're going to try to do it quickly. So I'm going to hit the overview. Rich is our utilities consultant. He is basically our extension of staff for me. I don't have a deputy at the moment. I don't have any other staff person at the level where we get into what we're talking about. Rich is that extension of staff, and we coordinate heavily with Dwayne and Community and Economic Development, Alan, Tim, and Andrew, And the good news, as far as my role, is before I got into utilities, I'm an AICP planner that did land use and zoning for many years. So I get all this, and I get how it works together. And that's why we're using utilities as a growth management tool. So when we get into level service, we'll explain from a comp plan policy standpoint how we use level service. But then at the same time, let me just jump to a preview. We've got major things underway with water. We have a water treatment plant literally being constructed at Villa City Road and US 27. And it's 100% grant funded for construction. It's pretty awesome. Then we've got, so water for the foreseeable future, we're good on capacity, we're good on our consumptive use permit with the state. It's the wastewater. We have 2 plants. And I gotta tell you, for a city of 26,000, most cities this size do not have 2 sewer plants. They usually just have 1, but it's our 10 miles by 6 mile service area that we have one right up there by the turnpike on State Road 19. That's our Sunshine facility. And then down here off of downtown on Sampy Road, which is not far off of Festival Park, dirt road back there if you ever want to go see our sewer plant. We've got a sewer plant there. Both plants are 1 million gallons a day treatment. The southern plant, you ready, is at 120% capacity. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Well, we're expanding the plant right now with a almost $50 million project to modernize the old plant that's been there since 1980 and expand enough on the site that we have that our permitted capacity will grow to 1.67 million gallons a day, which is another 670,000 gallons of treatment. Meanwhile, the Sunshine plant up there in the north, serving areas of the community like Trilogy and Wilson Lake Parkway, the Commerce Park and Phillips Landing and others, that one is, as of today, just under 65% capacity. The problem is, for that plant on paper, with the commitments already made, with development that is happening, not maybe happening, it's already projected by 2031 to be at over 90% capacity. And the Sampy plant in the south, we have obligations to that plant as well, and it's projected to be at capacity, even with the expansion, over 90% by around 2031. So it begs the question, what's Groveland's plans? And we're planning for the future. So I say that because we're going to talk about level service and how we're supposed to plan for the future. But the issue in Groveland is we've already triggered the numbers that require you to go start planning for your new capacity. We hit both plants, and now we're planning. And we have a site in the north part of the city on Villa City Road, right next to the Commerce Park, that has been deeded to the city by the owner of the Villa City PUD. That's the same owner that deeded us 4 acres for the water treatment plant, which is under construction. We have 25 acres for a wastewater facility. And that wastewater facility will be the facility of the future. And so as we get into level service, that's about planning, and that's about a generational 5, 10, 20-plus year process. What we are literally doing today, though, is managing not concurrency as much as what capacity is left at each plant, even with the expansion of the southern Sampy plant, and then how are we managing that capacity, knowing inevitably we've already projected capacity concerns down the road. So the northern plant that we're planning actually is to not only serve the northern service area, but take pressure off of the Sampy southern plant. And because we just invested in a connection between the 2 service areas for sewer, and we have lots of connections either in place or coming to loop our water system. So water's good, but on sewer, we just finished recently a forest main along State Road 19, and now we're working on innovative ways to shift the flows between the 2 plants while we design and build the new facility. So there's your, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how we're managing what's already happened before any of us got involved, before I became staff, before Dwayne became staff, before any of you joined the Planning and Zoning Board, and maybe in some cases before a few of you even moved to Groveland. These things were already set in motion, and now we're having to deal with it. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. Jeremiah's going to put it back to the slides we were talking about. And if you'll give Rich a chance to go through this pretty quickly, we're trying not to give you too many slides. I then want to give you plenty of time to do Q&A. Yes, sir.
Before we do that, you said we're good with water. Is there, with the sewage treatment plants, we're looking at capacities. Do we look at water the same way, or do we look at that differently?
Water's unique in the fact that we're dealing with a consumptive use permit requirement with the state through the St. Johns River Water Management District. That's who permits. And it is always an ongoing, always negotiation that even when we get a new CUP allocation, we're almost immediately shifting into planning for the next allocation depending on what the growth issues are. So right now, two things are happening at once. Our existing CUP document with the state has a provision that once that new water treatment plant at Villa City Road and US 27 goes online, the wells are already in the ground. These are the first ever lower Floridan aquifer wells that will be drinking supply wells that are lower. Every other well at the other 5 locations in Groveland is upper aquifer. This is a big shift for the district because they permitted a lot of these lower aquifer wells at once as alternative water supply to start testing the efficacy of going to the lower and taking the pressure off the upper. And why am I telling you all this? Because our existing CUP document says as soon as that new plant is online with those lower aquifer wells, we immediately get a huge boost in our CUP. And that covers us for about the next 10 years. What we're doing now is that same map I just showed you of all the land use designations and zoning for the whole service area. We're showing that, no, we're not talking, state, about projections. We're talking about actual properties annexed, entitled, zoned. This is what they're allowed to do. We are planning for that number of units and that amount of gallons per day and showing them that, as the mayor has said, our projections reasonably for this next allocation, we're using about 45,000-ish is our projection number, and we're debating that, with district. The good news is, although it can be contentious between local and state, we walk into the door with the district that you and I, Groveland and Water Management District, we're stewards of the same resource. It's our water, yours, mine, everybody's. So we approach it that way, that if we show them that we're being reasonable and not asking for too much. And one other detail that's really helpful is we've created an alliance with the other South Lake cities. So Mascot, Claremont, Mineola, Howey in the Hills, even the Sunshine Private Utility District that serves Four Corners, we're part of a consortium that meets quarterly and deals directly with the state on water supply planning. So I hope that answers.
Okay, that does help, because when you make the comment, we're good on water, that helps me understand that what I think you mean by that is, in terms of sizing of water mains and distribution and all of that, we're sized appropriately for growth, and the actual consumption is an ongoing, the allocation, so to speak, is an ongoing thing.
Yeah, short-term consumption for 10 years, we're good. We're working on the long-term 20-plus year allocation. And then for the distribution system, most of Groveland is newer infrastructure except in this footprint that is historic Groveland. So as the new State Road 50 alignment gets built, for example, we are planning for how much of the old stuff can we replace while we're having to adjust our utilities for the new roadway. This is the only area of Groveland where we have aged infrastructure, is this footprint that is the old downtown.
Thank you, TJ.
Yep. So if that's okay, questions, and we'll jump into Rich.
Okay, so you brought up Mascot and surrounding areas. Are they part of this? Are we taking their wastewater also? So should we consider having them in our meetings and saying, look, our growth depends on how much you are growing also?
That's a wonderful question. Our only partner that has an agreement that dates back to 2013 is the city of Mascot. And they are allowed to send us 275,000 gallons a day of wastewater. Today, they're sending us about 60. And part of that is because we didn't really start allowing them to connect the way they intended to. That agreement was adopted in 2013. It was about 8 years before they approved subdivisions that started sending us anything. And I say that because we are already, in fact, yesterday, I met with the city manager of Mascot, their public works director, their finance director, outlining that here's how we're handling your 275,000 gallons. They are responsible for paying the city of Groveland $7.8 million right now toward that new plant expansion. And that's really where their capacity is coming from. So they've helped us do some work on that plant that we needed to do regardless. What we're doing now is informing them that with this new plant, you're not going to be able to meet your own growth plan without a plan. So you're either building your own plant now, or if you want to pay into this one, we need to know in about 90 days, because we're going to the state and we're starting the financing package of how we would build this new plant. So this is really serious stuff that we're doing, and Mascot is engaged, and we're very familiar with their land use plan. The only thing that I'll say is they have a LPA, Local Planning Agency, and Planning and Zoning Board. They have a city council. They've made annexation and land use and zoning decisions, and they've done all that with development agreements. But they can't fulfill that without partnering with us. And so that's yet another unique growth management tool that Groveland has for Southlake, is we're kind of a regulator right now of not whether you can or can't develop, but the tempo at which you will develop. Okay, any other questions? All right, Rich Niles is with a company called Woodard & Curran, and I want to say this up front because there's confusion about this. We have a whole separate part of Woodard & Curran that runs our utilities. There's 28 guys, 28 positions, every day right here in Groveland. Water plants, we have 4 that are active water plants. We have 2 sewer plants, 2 reclaimed plants attached to that, and then the whole distribution, collection systems, lift stations. So that's a separate contract. Rich is under a planning and engineering contract with the same company, but he, instead of having local guys, he has national people that are part of Woodard & Curran. So when we tackle big things like consumptive use permits, utility master planning, he's got a deep bench. And so that's part of the joy of having Woodard & Curran involved, is they're extremely helpful. And one of the reasons we have a new water treatment plant coming that's 100% construction paid for by a grant is they've helped us and helped me do all the prerequisite things with the state to qualify you for money that some cities and utilities are too lazy to go after. We've done all that prerequisite work, and we're getting the money. Proud to say, since I've been here, just a number that is important, the city has borrowed for new utility projects in the last 6 years or 7 years I've been in this position. They've borrowed $62 million in loans, mostly for that wastewater plant. We have brought in $65 million in utility grant opportunities. So our numbers are looking good right now. So with that, I'm going to attempt to get us back on the slide track. I'm trying to keep this brief, but I get excited. And Rich, where do you want to take it? Go right ahead. You want to take it from here? I think I just jumped a slide extra, so maybe you can get back.
Good evening, everyone. TJ can write a book with the storytelling he has for utilities, but I have to say we are pretty proud because we started a master planning effort and facility planning effort several years ago, and at the same time we were doing facility planning, we were acquiring, submitting applications for grant opportunities and actually getting projects in motion. So the drinking water plant that we're discussing, we hadn't even had a chance to modify the consumptive use permit before the wells were drilled. So we're still in the process of doing that. So we've done a lot of things are in motion and will continue to be. But that original master plan had a vision which was focused on, how do we look at the utility service area in the comp plan? We essentially were addressing level of service as part of that planning process, looking at what does the future population look like, what does the service area look like, and strategically, where is growth going to occur from what we know, from what is entitled, to look at where is it strategic for facilities to be located and where would upsizing have to occur, things like that. So this has kind of been ongoing for a while, and now that we're looking at a comp plan update to these sections, this is sort of formalizing some of that. And some of the documentation we have to support these levels of service are in those documents, and that's kind of what I was hoping to go through this fairly quickly. So each level of service category that's in the comp plan, we're going to focus on fire flow and potable first, and just look at what is currently in the plan, what is proposed for changes, if any, and then what's the supporting rationale for that level of service, what does it really mean? And then TJ's already hit upon capacity as it relates to those level of service categories. So what is available now for capacity, and then what is being done to address any capacity issues? So with a growing community, there's always going to be a concern about maintaining that capacity, so, excuse me. So the first level of service category is fire flow, and so currently there's 1,000 gallons per minute is the fire flow criteria for 2 hours, residual pressure of 20 PSI, so at 1,000 gallons per minute, maintaining that minimum pressure to support firefighting activity. So a lot of what we do from a sizing of all water distribution systems relates to fire flow. Do we have adequate flow? So pressure is easier to maintain, but if you have high flow, it's hard to maintain that pressure, right? So what we're proposing, which is what we've already been doing as part of the master planning, is 1,200 gallons per minute. That's ISO standard is 1,200, 20 PSI. So we're just following industry standards for that. And then when we look at the potable side of the equation, we're looking at, well, what's the consumption per capita? Right, so we have a system design requirement for fire flow. That's the dominating factor for how we design systems. And then what we actually need for total water for potable purposes or overall consumption rather, not just potable is part of that equation, is 250 gallons per minute, which was what was currently in the comp plan. And I think it was probably 250 because at the time the people per household was a little bit lower, maybe, or it just didn't consider the overall gross consumption, which is in the Central Florida Water Initiative. So we're proposing to update that to 310 gallons per day per person. And that's basically looking at the per capita gross consumption in the Central Florida Water Initiative, that target number of 115. So if you look in the sub-bullets here, 2.7 people per ERU, at times 115 gets us to 310. So that's kind of how we come up with these numbers. So we want to make sure that any future development, we can at least provide that level of service, gallons per day per household or per ERU. Non-resident, yeah.
Yeah, can I just interject with a question here real
Yep.
quick? So just to fast forward a sec, when we get to capacity, are we basing our capacity numbers on the 310 that you're proposing here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Like I said, so we've been working to do updates to the consumptive use permit based upon latest population projections, as well as the per capita demand that we're seeing and the target for Central Florida Water Initiative. So even though we haven't updated these numbers in the comp plan, we've been using that for planning purposes, yeah.
I apologize. When I said capacity, I was referring to wastewater because if so much water goes into into a residence, so much water is going to come out of a residence, right?
Right.
And so are you basing for the wastewater off of the 310?
Not necessarily, because we have irrigation as part of that equation. So when we get to the wastewater slide next, I think that'll make a little more sense.
Okay,
But
thank you.
it obviously, there's a relationship there, right?
Yeah.
So not all of your, most of your, 80% of your wastewater, your water consumption, household consumption goes to wastewater for indoor use.
Okay.
Or a little bit more than that. There's always some water loss, right? In terms of what actually leaves the treatment plant.
Sure. Thank you.
So non-residential, the gallons per day varies, so we don't really have a level of standard for non-residential. It's not something we can easily rely upon, so it's more of, we have kind of, in this equation, we have factors basically built in. When you look at the per capita for ERUs, that value, if we were to look at it on a, commercial non-residential basis, it does account for some of that. But obviously, if there's a large user that comes into the city, the question is can we meet that level of service for that particular facility? And really, you get into more of a fire flow design issue. So, you see non-residential facilities come in that have large water demand for fire flow. It just means that they're going to have to address that as part of their site design. So they're going to have to incorporate their own booster stations or storage if needed. And we can't design the entire city system to meet the demands of a few large users. So.
Can I ask what would qualify as a very large user example? Would that be like a bottled water plant or a golf course or what, like, can you give me an example?
Or Domino's, they're
Yeah,
a significant water
what-
user. So it's not so much that their daily use is the challenge, it's providing fire flow support for that. So that 1,200 gallon per minute fire flow kind of criteria there, that is intended to address the general system. Now, some of those users, based on the size of their building and the sprinkled area, so that gets into kind of the design of fire suppression for that particular building. Because in the past, there's been a lot of discussion around whether there's adequate fire protection of fire flow is within the Commerce Park. And because some of the testing, and actually it was really the testing methods, TJ, I think, that were, when they test that equipment, they run 50% more than the system can handle to run the test, but that doesn't mean they're not meeting the criteria. The city isn't meeting that criteria, so. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and I want to point out, like our Commerce Park, the water system for that Commerce Park was a private utility. Groveland bought it in 2006. Groveland had to build a booster station on State Road 19 to up pressures into that park as bigger and bigger buildings started coming in, like the Circuit City that was here. I say all that because we're about to put a 16-inch water main along US 27 by the park to the new plant to bolster the pressures in that area. And our focus right now is not just supply, it's fire flow pressures as well. And I will take Ms. Hoover opportunity to say most of our big users are big subdivisions. But we occasionally get that economic development request of, hey, we've got this plant that wants to move in. Can you handle it? Well, if it's a bottling company, no. But if it's something that needs a reasonable amount of water that we can manage, then we say, yes, we have that capacity. Niagara Bottling Company, although in the Commerce Park, is not annexed by the city of Groveland and is not served for bottling purposes by the city of Groveland. We serve them just normal connection for interior use in restrooms, but Niagara has their own lower aquifer well on their site that was permitted back in the day when the city of Groveland, after agreeing to provide water, changed their mind and said no. So they went their own way with the state, successfully got their own well, and a lot of people still to this day remember, well, Niagara came, they must be taking all of Groveland's water. We have nothing to do with the bottling company aspects of Niagara Bottling.
Yeah, so similarly, Cherry Lake Tree Farms, they have their own consumptive use permit for withdrawal, groundwater resources and surface water. So some of your largest users that would normally put incredible demand on your system, they have their own permits for that. So but again, at the end of the day, they draw from the same aquifer. So there are, considerations for what's within Groveland's general vicinity for groundwater withdrawal and permitting, so.
Rich, I have one more story. I can't resist. So everybody know where Palisades is? All right, Palisades is served by the city of Groveland for water. It is not, Palisades houses are not in the city of Groveland. Crazy as it sounds, the city bought the golf course 5 years ago, annexed it just for future purposes, and then went to the Water Management District and said, we want to formally, legally retire and record on the golf course property a prohibition of withdrawal from the aquifer. And we would like for you to give us credit as a city for that capacity. And they agreed to it. So we literally pulled off something they had never done of buying a golf course, retiring the water rights, taking credit for that, and then selling the golf course to the HOA for them to maintain, understanding that even if you want it to be a golf course, you're not getting water from the aquifer, and you could buy it from the city as reclaim, but that has never happened. So I love that story because it was really creative to take a really, really heavy user that had a permit for over 600,000 gallons of water a day, and we retired it.
Yeah, so there's other strategies that the city has in the master plan and the capital plan to address groundwater management, withdrawal, alternative water supply. So there are planning projects that we're always pursuing funding for alternative water supply, and these are just consumptive use permit requirements that are going to allow the city to withdraw what you need to do, withdraw for potable. So we talk a lot in the city about wastewater capacity constraints, but if you can't withdraw enough water permitted from the aquifer, then you can't build it no matter what. You don't have any wastewater, any wastewater concerns rather. So when we look at the permitted capacity, currently what's permitted is 4.1 MGD. And TJ referenced before, it's from the upper and lower aquifer. We haven't shifted to the lower aquifer, but 1.6 of that 4.5 is allocated to be used from the lower aquifer. So currently all that is from the upper aquifer now. And then what we're proposing in the modification of the consumptive use permit is a future demand of 7.9 MGD, so almost doubling your permitted capacity. Now, the district may not give you all that at once. They're hesitant to do a 20-year plan and give you authorization for that up front, so they usually do it in about 5 to 10-year increments. And that's just as growth occurs, then they'll increase your allocation if we can justify it. So we start out looking at that future scenario and how we're going to meet all the demand projected based on comp plan projections and utility service area obligations. So I think it's just one of those things that, just like TJ mentioned about the golf course, that permitted capacity, and the city has been, we've been planning this for a couple of years now, looking at all the other consumptive use permits within the utility service area. Like, for example, Cypress Reserve, in their development agreement, there's a provision within that to retire and transfer the rights to the city for the consumptive use permit associated with, I think it was Strack Farms. Is that? Yeah. So we're trying to also be cognizant of the fact that there are permitted withdrawals within the city limits, other CUPs that the city could then take over. So if a large development is going to then consume, or require an increase to the city's allocation, we're going to take the allocation that was previously permitted and put it under the city's allocation. So those are the other things that we're doing to manage that capacity need. Any further questions?
One more. How does that affect future and current hydrant spacing? Like, does that mean you have to put your new hydrants at a different space since you're carrying more GPMs, or does that stay the same and none of that changes?
So hydrant spacing is really just kind of per industry standard. So just because we're trying to have a higher level of service, so you mean like 1,000 versus 1,200 GPM? Yeah, it doesn't necessarily change that. So that's not a factor in that. So the hydrant spacing is based upon, proximity to dwellings, essentially, and on a per foot space basis. So, I mean, currently, there are some areas where it probably doesn't meet the current standards for spacing. So as part of the hydrant replacement program, over time, we'll have to consider adding hydrants in some areas possibly. But we're first trying to address any pressure deficiencies or fire flow deficiencies in the system.
So just extending any kind of water main, automatic specification requirements of spacing of hydrants, but then there's fire code that kicks in when you actually develop property that may result in other hydrant locations beyond. Like if we just did a water main extension, like we're doing on 27, you're going to see fire hydrants every 500 feet, I believe, as part of that design, and that's our industry standard.
Right. Well, it also depends on a site-by-site basis. Some of the, proximity to buildings, so the fire department can actually access things and access something with respect to the size of the building, be able to access all sides of the building, for example, for really large buildings. All right, wastewater. Keep plugging away. So the only level of service category for wastewater is the gallons per day per ERU treated. And so what do we have for capacity for collection system conveyance as well as treatment capacity? So we're not proposing any change to that because that seems to be sufficient. And so really what that's based upon is the, the flows per ERU. So we've taken, through the master planning effort, we looked at the Sampe service area and the gallons per day per capita from that service area, which is about 63 gallons per day. And then you factor in I&I, so you multiply that by the 2.7, and that's kind of roughly how we arrive at something that gets us close to, 30% of that number of 250. Now, the reason we want to use a higher number is we always want to make sure we have additional capacity in wastewater at the plant. And when we design lift stations and force mains for transferring the waste to collection system, you want to, for design criteria, you want to use a bigger number because you want to have that contingency built into it. So we kind of have some buffer in there. It doesn't seem to be a lot of reason to change that right now. So, so it helps us kind of give us that peak flow contingency management. Right now, what I have below that is showing the permitted capacity of both facilities. TJ spoke to that earlier, the expansion of Sampe. And then the new wastewater facility, the capacity needs that we think are somewhere in the range of maybe 2 to 3 MGD. But that doesn't mean we start building a 2 MGD plant now. So that's kind of what TJ was speaking to earlier, 1.5 MGD. It also depends upon, getting financial security for that money to pledge to actually borrow the money to build that plant. So that's a process that we're going through right now. So in terms of future capacity needs, that's really it right there. As we know that the existing facilities are obligated by about 2031, they'll be at capacity with the expansion. Any questions?
Is the new wastewater treatment plant that we're currently planning to build, is that going to be something that we'll be able to double like we did Sampi in the future? Like, are we building that out to
Right.
modify it to increase capacity
That's why we
for
have
future
25-acre
use?
site is to
That's
be
what
able
I
to expand
figured.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, we think that site can probably treat at least 6 MGD. You know, so we looked at the physical footprint, and that was sort of the basis of that 25-acre, allocation. So we look back at the master plan. The master plan had higher projections for population and included all of Mascot. So if we take everything together and we decommission Sunshine, yeah, you might need 6 MGD if all those entitlements actually happen. That's kind of that's a build-out worst-case scenario. Right now, what we think is feasible in the short term based upon the need and be able to finance that on, the basis of new development, essentially, paying for that, the majority of that, 1.5 MGD, maybe some of that is Mascot. That 1.5 MGD facility would be designed for some of the critical components like headworks, some of the existing infrastructure to accommodate a second phase up to 3 MGD. And 3 MGD is probably good for the next 15 years, roughly. It all depends on the pace of development and how that's paid for. So we're looking at capacity reservation fees and other mechanisms to secure that funding to do that, so it's not on the current ratepayers. But yeah, the current design approach, the loan application for design that the city has at the August hearing with DEP would be for a 1.5 MGD plant that could be expanded another 1.5 on top of that. But that's all subject to change based upon being able to pay for it.
And I'll add that that 25 acres, where we talk about 6 MGD, that's a lot. But I will say this, that part of that plan is that Northern Sunshine plant that used to be a private utility on State Road 19 by the Turnpike, we are already seeing the future in 10 to 15 years. We need to be planning to retire it. And the new facility would be the facility for the next 2 generations. So I feel good in planning for the city of Groveland that having that site, having it already conveyed to the city, having the fact that we've got a good phase 1 that makes sense from a cost-benefit ratio without overcommitting, we picked the sweet spot. If we build 1 MGD, you're underbuilding. If you build 2, it's a lot of debt to take at once. But if you do 1.5, there's enough developer obligations that we really want this first phase of that new plant to be growth paid for as much as feasible.
Well, and so thinking about 1.5 to 3, we know that Mascot has close to 0.9 or 1 MGD in total build-out future need. Whether that is something that can be secured and pledged towards a new facility, that's a big question. That's part of why we're meeting with Mascot now. Now, when we look at decommissioning Sunshine in the future, we think because the facility's already been operating for 25 years, and another 15 years or so, is about when it probably needs to be retired or significantly refurbished, and the cost benefit of refurbishing that versus expanding at the new plant, it's probably, life cycle cost is probably going to work in the favor to expand and replace that facility. So if you think about it, it takes about 5 years to design and build this plant, and then about 10 years after that, Sunshine will have to be replaced. So we're looking at probably 15 years from now is when Sunshine would have to be, financed to refurbish or expand at the new site. So we're always trying to think a little bit ahead of time. We don't want to build a plant and then have to do an expansion 5 years thereafter. So finding that right size sweet spot is kind of, that's what we're referring to.
Right size.
Yeah.
Alicia?
What would be like the difference in cost benefits, I guess, in refurbishing versus like a whole new one? And what does refurbishing consist of?
Hey, Rich, I love telling the story because it's so simple. So we evaluated both plants 5 years ago. We looked at the Southern Sampi plant, and we said, enough room to expand. It's a 1980s plant, but it is worth modernizing. It is a little bit more expensive to both modernize and try to expand on an existing site. It's so much easier and cheaper to go out to a greenfield site. But Sampi, we felt like we own it, we've got the space, let's do it this way. Sunshine, we looked at, and it's sitting in flood zone, next to wetlands, very constrained, with a Days Inn that's probably going to be demolished, sitting next to it. And we're going, this just doesn't make sense cost effectively to try to expand here. When we have a 25-acre site, we can go and build a new plant much cheaper, and that's why we shared with you. The immediate need is that 1.5 to maintain our obligations, but it's a site where we can actually plan 15 years from now and retire that old plant.
Thank you.
Well, and just to add to that, so we did do a facility plan last year that looked at those alternatives. We looked at what is the cost to replace and/or expand Sunshine versus a new facility. And the challenge is that service area is going to continue to grow. You know, Bright Hill is a major development in that area, but this general service area is growing, and then if you factor in Villa City, if that actually comes to fruition, strategically, the location makes more sense, and the ability to expand it and have that flexibility to expand, you know, on a greenfield footprint, essentially, you know, it's less disruption to operations. So the life cycle cost was advantageous to go to the new site versus replacing Sunshine. But the numbers weren't, you know, they weren't $50 million difference. It was, you know, maybe 8 to 10 million, something like that, you know, life cycle cost.
Yeah.
So it's not, you could argue that if you didn't have growth occurring the way it is or anticipated, then maybe Sunshine at some point would make sense to rehabilitate that facility, but it has very limited room for expansion,
Gotcha.
so.
These next couple real
Yeah.
quick.
Okay. So reclaimed water level service. So right now, the comp plan actually doesn't have anything in there for gallons per day per capita or per ERU. What we're suggesting is that this is the level of service we're trying to meet with the system design now, which is 160 gallons per day per ERU, residual pressure of 20 PSI minimum. We know that doesn't always activate the sprinkler heads, so that's obviously a bare minimum. But you know, this is based upon what we think we can produce for reclaimed water, so that we're not having to augment it as much as possible. That becomes a challenge when we're augmenting with clean aquifer water to the system, but that's essentially what happens now. So moving forward, when we look at how new development is approached, what we've incorporated into development agreements is that the reclaim demand should match their wastewater production, essentially, for reclaim. And if they have to augment that, then it's augmented via on-site irrigation wells that are permitted by the district, so that we're not having to design a system for excessive irrigation. So we want to sell the water that we're producing for your reclaim, but we don't want to have to build systems that are meeting these peak demands for irrigation that are excessive. Plus, your consumptive use permit requires you to restrict that. So utilities want to sell water, and they want to sell irrigation water, but there's also a limit to what we can reasonably sell. If there's egregious use or excessive watering, that becomes an issue for your permit.
Why does this matter so much? Because when we talked about the consumptive use permit for drinking water purposes, we don't want irrigation competing with our drinking water supply. So the more we convert over to alternative water supply, and I'll give you two examples. We have reclaimed several neighborhoods along State Road 50, Westwood, Lake Douglas, Cypress Oaks, Marsh Point. Those are all served by reclaim. Then you get over to Waterside Point. City connected it to reclaim, but then we restored a system that failed that the developer put in there in 2006 in Waterside Point. It's using Crystal Lake, the old sand mine lake, to pull water for irrigation for the neighborhood. We restored that. We now hold the consumptive use permit, and that's alternative water supply. So we get bonus points toward our CUP for having 2 reclaim plants and a Waterside Point arrangement where we use lake water for irrigation. So I just wanted you to know, why were we even showing you this? Because this is what takes pressure off of our CUP.
We also want to speak to how we're maintaining that capacity. So reclaim capacity in the northern service area, which is fed by the Sunshine wastewater plant, you know, that we have a lower aquifer well that's been installed, and we're trying to expand the pump station to meet the pressure demands. So we have a source of supply and increased pressure to meet that service area demand. But the demand in that service area is probably higher than what's anticipated in the future, or at least what will be designed for. So that's more of a temporary solution. We hope that we don't have to augment that as much as possible. So the city's water conservation program helps curb that conservation, or helps curb that irrigation demand, and helps us kind of maintain a reasonable level of service.
And I mentioned the southern part of the city, but for those of you that know the north pretty well, every neighborhood along Wilson Lake Parkway is on reclaim water. Phillips Landing is on reclaim, and Bright Hill just went under construction on the other side of the turnpike. They will be on reclaim. So our heaviest users are off of that Sunshine plant.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Reclaim? All right. Last but not least, stormwater. So what we have for stormwater is we have a few criteria that currently exist in the comp plan. So when we speak to infiltration and treatment, you know, if you have it or you don't on site, Essentially, when it comes to new development, redevelopment, the city follows St. John's River Water Management District guidelines for permitting for stormwater. That establishes the standards. So the city doesn't really have anything above and beyond that, but we do call out for conveyance and collection systems because that does tend to vary a little bit. We have our design standard, but then when we're looking at systems to accommodate, existing development or problem areas within the city, we're striving for a 10 or 25-year design storm to convey stormwater flows. So the challenge is you have older parts of the city that don't meet that criteria at all. So we're just trying to basically, for anything proposed here, there's no significant change for those criteria. The only thing we clarified is with respect to the green swamp, there's an element in the comp plan that speaks to infiltrating the first 3 inches, and that's really just to keep water on site. We just wanted to clarify that it should be 3 inches of the 50-year storm from directly connected impervious area. So there's just a minor clarification there, but essentially there wasn't a whole lot of need to change the stormwater level of service criteria.
I got a question. Okay, so I had to look some of this up. So the MS4 is the municipal separate stormwater sewer system.
Yep.
And your basement management action plan is FDEP along with FDOT to repair impaired water bodies to health by reducing pollutants. So if the BMP is affected by both our wastewater upgrades and our stormwater upgrades, on here it says pending needs or requirements. Which one of those is needed and which one of those is required on that list?
I would say the first 2 are required. So there's regulatory requirements to have a permit for your MS4. So within that references certain criteria for the city to meet to implement the Basin Management Action Plan, which is a nutrient reduction plan for nitrogen and phosphorus. So that's a citywide plan, and what is baked into the St. Johns River permit requirements, they address on a site-by-site basis as part of a permit application, they're addressing nutrient management, management of design storm events, et cetera, infiltration treatment and flood management. The challenge is you have a lot of existing development that doesn't meet those stormwater standards. So the MS4 permit requires you to establish a program that manages a variety of aspects, and some of that gets down to nutrient management. So that's where the Basin Management Action Plan comes in, and Groveland has a target of nutrient reduction citywide. Now, wastewater is a factor in that. Septic systems are a factor in that. So the city has an obligation to develop an action plan to show how you're going to meet that nutrient reduction requirement, and that's not fully developed yet. So there are additional sort of pending needs that need to be incorporated into a capital plan for stormwater that we haven't had a chance to address. So we don't have a funding mechanism either for stormwater at this time too, for that program.
And for me, for the area of critical concern, I would rather see that changed, not removed, and to be updated on the wording. I think removing anything out of that area is a poor possibility for later. That's just my 2 cents on that. Okay, I'm done.
I will add that the future, in 10 years or so, your wastewater treatment plants will have a stricter nutrient criteria to meet as well. So we'll have to see what's more cost effective to meet some of that through stormwater improvements, mitigation projects, or wastewater. So. More to come.
Does that conclude?
Yep.
Okay.
That's it. I think this is back to you.
Is this Alan's slide?
Just kind of, I didn't just kind of recap.
You can skip this one.
Skip that one, okay.
All right, here we go.
So we can segue really quickly, if it's okay, Mr. Chair, right into traffic. I've already introduced the fact that I'm here as staff representing both. David Muntean is with HAF. They are a consulting firm that we use for various engineering purposes, including utilities. But David Muntean is our point guy for the last 3 years on everything transportation. So he's going to walk you through level of service.
Good evening. My name is Dave Muntean. I'm with HAF Associates. I've been in this profession. I thought it'd be a good idea, since I haven't met you before. Let me just tell you a little bit about me in about 45 seconds. I've been doing the traffic operations and safety, and I review other consultants' work. I've been doing this for over 40 years. It's my bread and butter. I've been in Florida the whole time. I enjoy what I do. We talk about traffic. Hopefully, when we go over this, you'll think traffic is a little bit fun as well. We'll see. But yeah, I've been dabbling in safety. I've been working with TJ and Dwayne and everybody for about 3 years, kind of an extension of staff as well. We go through a lot of different aspects of transportation and traffic engineering and the planning side as well. So in a nutshell. So traffic level of service, that's going to be part one that we talk about. Part two is going to be about how do we manage traffic growth in the city of Groveland. And I just want to mention one thing before we go to the next slide. We're going to just have a little open session here because I want to just make sure we're understanding things as we go along and we can talk about it because I think it's very important. The things that we learn tonight will be very beneficial towards this comp plan year process, but it's going to also be beneficial for everything that you talk about traffic from here for many months to come. So it'll be worth the effort of going through and making sure we understand certain basic fundamentals of this, make sure we're all clear on it, because if you're not clear on it, then we might not understand some of the things we talk about after that particular talk. So we'll just kind of go through that. So let's go ahead to the next slide here. I want to talk about level of service from the very beginning just for a second here. And does everybody here know what level of service is and how it works and what it means? I mean, do we have an understanding of that yet, like in full? So it's basically a report card for roads. I think you've understood that probably. A through F are the measures that we talk about when drivers are behind the wheel and how they feel about congestion and the freedom to maneuver. Now, those feelings that we get, I mean, they can lead to frustration. They can lead to frustration that impacts safety. We also, when we have levels of service that are good, we have higher speeds on the roadway. So there's some trade-offs there. Sometimes higher speeds means a safety issue as well. So, but also congestion, delay, volume, everything plays into what level of service is. So let's go to the next slide. I'm just going to explain some of the basic theory of this so you understand. We've got level of service A through F shown on here. Unlike grades in school, there is an E in the middle of D and F. And A is, on the left side, is pretty darn good. I mean, free flow type of speed that we have there, and then you can get up to F, which becomes overcapacity and gridlock. But there's a couple things on this graph I wanted to point out. First of all, traffic volume. If we just look at that line only, those are hypothetical volumes that just basically show you that they increase. As they increase, obviously, when traffic increases, it gets more congested. There's more delay. Okay, so speeds will start to come down as well during that process, but the line basically says the more volume you have, that's when you start moving through the letters of the level of service until you get so much volume that you end up with level of service F, and you get gridlock and people are backing up, and the green at the signalized intersection doesn't clear all the queuing that happens at the intersection, and things start to back up and it snowballs, and that's level of service F, okay? That's the line for the traffic volume. Now on the speed, the dashed red line, as you travel through the level of services, it makes sense. It's a higher speed in level of service A, right? And as the speed comes down and the volumes increase and everything, the speed's coming down and it gets so slow and congested that we're getting into that E and F range as things get congested. So if everybody on the same page with this, pretty simple, right? When you just look at it like this, okay? That's the basic theory. I will point out one thing though, that we're only talking about, when we're talking about level of service in the city of Groveland, or anywhere else for the matter, we're talking about it from a peak hour basis. The peak hour, it's the heaviest hour of the day. And we design and work from that hour because if we can satisfy the problems in that hour, then the rest of the hours of the day, a little bit less traffic, a little bit higher speeds, a little bit better level of service, and the other hours are taken care of for the most part. We do look at AM and PM peak hours a lot because, in commuting hours, it's the opposite direction in the AM as it is in the PM, right? So yeah, we look at that. But for what we're talking about right now, we're just thinking of the peak hour. It's kind of a two-way peak hour, but the peak hour, not daily, okay? All right, so I just want to make sure that was clear. Another way to look at it on the next slide here is we got a little bit of a diagram here. I said next slide. Okay, I'm just making sure he's paying attention, not sleeping over here. No, I'm just kidding. So this is a little diagram that kind of shows you the basic look of what visually level service A through F might look like when you're looking at from the sky, okay? A, you've got very few vehicles out there, speeds are higher. Down at F, they're just lined up and they're congested and everything. Level service D, C, you know, kind of in the middle there. But that's just to give you kind of a visual representation as far as generally what traffic might look like during those particular times. Level service A, like I said, is like free flow speed. You know, we talk sometimes about how we'd really like to reduce the speed limits on some roads, right? Well, when you do the studies necessary to determine whether that's a good idea for a particular road, you measure those speeds in free flow conditions. That's when you measure. And then we determine what is the speed in which 85% of the traffic's traveling at. And if you have a 45 mile per hour roadway, it's very common for 85% of the people to be driving 50 to 52 miles per hour, right? And then you have the outliers above that and that go a lot faster, right? So that's the condition in which we measure the speeds out there. So anyways, that's that part of it. I will point out here that, you know, what do you think is an acceptable level of service here? Just looking at this diagram, well, level service F isn't it, right? Level service A doesn't happen very often in the peak hour, right? I mean, it's kind of tough, but, you know, level service, most places, level service D is the most commonly accepted level of service in our profession and on most of the roadways that are out there. Then you get into places like downtown Chicago where an acceptable level of service is E because the traffic's never going to be a D down there during the peak hour, right? So level service E is accepted down there. There's no situation where level service F is acceptable as far as a level of service goes. Level of service C, yeah, on some freeways and highways, sometimes on some higher speed roads, that's acceptable for sure, and D may or may not be. But that's kind of how we look at it in terms of what's acceptable and what's not.
Dave, I'm going to add some local color. We all understand on these state roads running through Groveland, we have different experiences. And sometimes, is it really the level of service of the roadway segment, or is it the congestion we experience because there's a bottleneck or a choke point right here at the signalization at 19 and 50, which is very real. So state roads, I think LOS is really clear with that diagram. I have had the experiences, I've been working for Groveland for 8 years. I'll get anecdotal comments from residents that say, for example, some county roads that are collector roadways, Cherry Lake Road, Villa City Road. Oh, the traffic is horrible. Well, the actual level of service numbers of the actual cars per day, even at peak hour, it's still only C on both of those roads, even at its worst. But because these are rural roadways with curves, rural character, maybe not the best shoulders, it doesn't feel right to have more traffic on it. So I just want to share that there's the feeling that people have, and then there's the actual data that we also have to look at.
So are we clear to this point on level of service as far as that goes? All right. We're going to double check you on this just for a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got to stop you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, sorry, it might have been TJ, a choke point as opposed to a level of service. And I literally wrote the question as you were saying, Highway 19 and 50. What is the level of service rating that you would give Highway 19 at 5 p.m.?
So I will
What is
say,
it?
I will give it a horrible rating, and I will share a quick story that the state shared with Groveland a couple years ago when we successfully got State Road 50's new construction approved for funding this year, is that DOT literally said to me, we are really, really good at planning for widening segments of roadways. But what we just learned from Groveland is we're apparently not very good about where you have a bottleneck like you guys are experiencing, more because of operational reasons. These signals configured the way they are at Lake and Broad and Lake and Orange and then Main and Lake and Broad, that really slows down the movement through Groveland. That will be eliminated with this new alignment. So that's really an operational issue, even beyond the level of service of a roadway segment.
Okay.
Yeah.
The perception, it's hard to separate those
Yeah.
two things, right?
Yeah, it's horrible to
And
sit in
perception's reality.
15
as we
minutes
say,
waiting to
right?
get through a
So,
red light, it's ridiculous.
I mean, I got parents that live downtown right here, and I live up at Cherry Lake Road. And there was an accident a couple days ago, and I had to keep hosting for a couple hours past what I was planning to host, because to try to get from there to here was 30-plus minutes. And it's, what, 2-3 miles at the most? So is that level of service? Obviously, an accident is different, but
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
perception is, oh my goodness, good
Yeah.
grief.
If there's no accidents and things like, you don't have the delays due to accidents, crashes, whatever, I mean, that's not what we analyze, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But, obviously, incident management is a different issue that's sometimes taken care of, and how do we redirect traffic during particular crashes, in certain cities, counties, and DOTs have plans in place for incident management. If there's a crash on the interstate, they have a way to divert them off and head them a different way, and they have a process for doing that. But we analyze it as if the traffic's moving and accidents are not backing up traffic.
Well, one of the challenges that we have here, as I'm sure you're well aware, is we have a lot of choke points.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't, to get from where I live,
Yeah.
I got 3 options if I stretch it to go to 19 and go north and all the way around, down 27, or south and over 50, or across Cherry Lake Road. And to get to Publix, I got one route.
Yeah.
Or I got to go all the way through Mineola
Yeah.
to get there.
It's like
you
having
know?
a network.
So even if we improve the level of service,
Yeah.
we have a lot of choke points.
Yeah, you do. The roadway network is a big deal, okay? And it's interesting, even in Tallahassee, they put the interstates in a long time ago. Then they build roads, and if they would do it all over again, they wouldn't have put it where they did because of the choke points that they have at particular places. And here, it reminds me of like having a roadway network. It's like, I'm simplifying it, like a H with a big circle around it.
Yeah.
And every time you got to go, and everybody's got to cross and go this way. And I mean, it's just kind of different. It's unique. You don't see it like that very often.
And although environmentally awesome and part of our natural charm, the Palat-Lakaha is a major environmental factor of our connectability in Groveland. So you've got Villa City Road, you've got 19, and you got Jalarmy, basically, where it's at, 561 to Jalarmy. That's your north-south in Groveland, 3 options.
Good. Okay. So you learned about level service, so let's do a little quiz here, okay? You show the next slide, please. What level of service is this? Just yell it out or whatever. F, okay. What's the next slide on here? What do you think this is? Level of service, just by looking at it based on what we talked about.
Probably a D.
Okay. That's a very good guess as well, because I would agree with that. And what else do you see in this picture? That's interesting.
You have multiple modes of transportation.
Yes, you have bicyclists, you have transit users, obviously that means pedestrians. So let's talk about why level service D sometimes is a preferred level of service. Because the traffic keeps moving, you're basically 80 to 90% of capacity at the very most, basically, as far as what the roadway could really handle before you get the level of service F. So it keeps moving, but yet it's congested enough that keeps the speed slow enough so it's safer for the bicyclists, pedestrians, and the transit users. So that's kind of why D is a really good level of service in terms of being acceptable, because it has the most benefits probably of all the different factors for all users of the roadway. So just to give you an idea. So you can see that's a pretty good idea. The one up to the left that you see on there, you can imagine the frustration some people would have, but it could be that that's every day, and they expect it to be that way. Sometimes it's about driver expectation. You know, if you encounter something you didn't expect on your way home, like a crash or anything else, you get a little bit more frustrated, and you're wondering what's going on and all that kind of stuff. But frustration leads to some dangerous moves sometimes on the roadway, right? And they could be paying attention to the cars and not see the pedestrian or whatever. It's just distractions galore, right, with the congestion. So go to the next photo here. How about this one? Okay, level service A. All right. Let's show one more thing on this slide here. Let me just talk about this. On the left side, you see your level services A through F again. The last column of this chart says V over C ratio. Does anybody know what that is? V over C? It's volume to capacity. That means, and the capacity is what can the road handle basically at F. Capacity over, if you're over capacity, you're at F. So that V over C ratio, as I mentioned for level service D just moments ago, you're at about 80 to 90% of your capacity before it breaks down with a level service D. That's how it feels when you're out there. Yeah, it's getting crowded out here, but I still got room to move, and I got 20% more, 15% more capacity out there, and I can keep moving. So, hey, I expect peak hours are going to be D, and I'm going to move a little slow. That's okay, right? So it just gives you an idea as far as all the different levels of service, like level service A, you're under 60% of the total capacity before breakdown. And C is like, it looks like a C in school even, right? It's 70 to 80%, right? That's a C, right? So, in some cases, at least it was back way when I was going to school, but yeah, 70 to 80% of the capacity at level service C is being used. So are we good on that? All right. The final question, your final exam, the next page. What about this one? What do you think that one might be? Level service,
C.
somewhere around C. It could be a couple other ones. It could be a D or a B, it depends, right? Because the light's green, everybody's moving, right? So, yeah, it could be one of those. It depends on, I can't tell how fast they're going right there, but it's certainly something there. All right, so let's go to the next step on level of service, and this has a lot to do with our comp plan work that we're doing. Adopted level of service standards. Now, we talked about level of service, so what do we mean by adopted standards? Adopted is basically a target that we would like to hit to consider a specific roadway segment acceptable or not, right? If we set an adopted targeted level of service of D because that's good for this roadway, then that's our adopted level of service standard. There's a different capacity kind of with that level service D than there is with level service F, right? Because we're going to accept 80% of our capacity for that level of service. That's our target. We want to be at 80% capacity at level service D, right? That's where we'd like to land. So we're going to say that's our adopted because that's our target. Okay, so everybody understand that? Okay, so that's our target. And let me tell you that the target that we set, the adopted level service standard, has a lot to do with the roadway type that we're talking about, what the function of the roadway is, perhaps whether it's rural or urban. There's a lot of factors. We have a lot of pedestrians and everything around. I mean, we set our level of service standards to be applicable and acceptable while considering all the users, right? So in certain situations, it might be unreasonable to assume a different level of service on a roadway that we think D would be the best one. Now, we have different sources out there that tell us and give us guidance on what we should follow to consider what our adopted level of service is. But in the end, we do have to use our engineering judgment on this and our experience on it and what we deem to be acceptable for the type of roadway that it is and all the different functions. Every single roadway segment, they're not the same, right? So we have to think about that a little bit when we set those things. But I would like to point out, I'm going to go to the next slide here. We have been developing some information here, and you're going to see that here in the upcoming slides. But I'm going to do a little bit of a comparison on the adopted level of service standards that exist out there today. And for example, I've picked out 6 of the segments within the city of Groveland city limits here, so we can talk about it and understand this part of it. It looks like we got State Road 19 on the left, State Road 33, one segment on State Road 50, one on the Turnpike, one on Cherry Lake Road, and one on O'Brien Road. And the third and fourth column, this is in the existing comp plan right now. We have standard adopted level of service standards mentioned in 2 different places in the comp plan. And are they the same? No, they're not the same, right? So we have a little bit of a conflict towards that discussion matter in the comp plan right now in two different places. So it's one of those things we have to fix during this process, okay? All right. If you go to the third column, this is an FDOT policy statement that they made back in 2017, updated in 2019, but it's some pretty good guidance for state roads that they kind of encourage people to follow, and it basically, looks at level service standard of D for urbanized areas and C for rural areas. And if we pick these segments, these 6 segments out, and we assign that to the 4 state roads that are on this chart, you can see they're also a little bit different than the other ones in the other categories for the comp plan. So again, we have a little bit of difference there in the different resources as far as what level of service, what is it? I mean, can you tell from these 3 columns, what is our standard level of service? They're different, so we have to fix that, right? And when you think about the DOT and how their premise for the adopted level of service suggestions, this one statement here will help you understand that a little bit. The department shall work with local governments to establish appropriate level of service targets for multimodal mobility and system design. The targets shall be responsive to all users for context, roadway function, roadway network design, and user safety. That's a pretty good couple of sentences there. And I think that's something that we should definitely keep in mind as we move forward on that. So we have some things that are contradicting each other here. So reminder, we're talking about peak hour again. Let's go to the 4th column. We have the Lake County Congestion Management System database that's used for traffic impact studies. And we use it all the time, and we review projects for the city of Groveland all the time. And in their tables, for these 6 segments, those are the level service standards that they've set for these particular roadway segments. And you'll see there are a few of them that are different in there as well than what these others on the chart show as well. So we've got 4 different places with adopted level service standards mentioned for these 6 segments, and you can see we need to fix this, right? We need to come up with something to help look at that and come up with something that we can use that makes sense. So we've looked at all this, and we'll go to the next page, and we've got a column called Proposed Transportation Element, Chapter 3, that we've been working on here with the planning department and everybody here, and we've come up with what we would recommend for the target level of service, the adopted level service standards for these. And I will tell you that after reviewing all these, the Lake County congestion management tables are pretty much spot on. All the segments in the city of Groveland that we have recommended for the targeted level service standard, all of them are the same except for 2 segments. And those 2 segments are on a portion of State Road 19 that's not shown on here, but they have it shown, I'm sorry, it's on State Road 19. It's between 27 and Cherry Lake Road. And they haven't changed it they still have it as rural, and we're using the urban category, and that makes a difference on the suggested level of service of being a D rather than a C. So just so you know, that's what we did there. That's the only difference. So we felt like that their tables are used the most. Their tables are very helpful, and they cover a lot of segments within Lake County. So within the city limits, we're pretty much the same as them, and we agree with that for the most part. So we've reviewed it all and have settled in on something that we feel is the most credible and the most worthy and the most usable, and it makes the most sense from that standpoint. So with that,
Hey, Dave, I want to
Yes.
point something out.
Go ahead.
We have something unusual in Groveland. Not only does it feel, I use this sometimes, that it almost feels like Groveland's in the crosshairs of the target of state roads. Like we're on this peninsula, and at the very dead center of the peninsula is Groveland with 19 and 33 running north-south and 50 running east-west. And let's not leave out US 27 and the Turnpike running the way they do. Turnpike's been there since 1968 and, been a huge influence, especially with that Commerce Park. And I bring this up because the state has a top-tier designation called the Strategic Intermodal System. And on that statewide system of importance, we have in Groveland, SIS facilities, Turnpike, US 27, and State Road 50. So I just want to point out, when you see SIS facility, that's a Strategic Intermodal System facility. And a lot of the driver of why those are SIS facilities is the amount of freight movement on those major roadways. Well, we are actively lobbying. The mayor has gone to DeLand to meet with the DOT secretary for Central Florida with me to talk about why is State Road 19 and State Road 33, with all these trucks running between US 27 and I-4, why are they not strategic intermodal system facilities? That's a lot of freight moving through Groveland. And the reason we're bringing this up is more than 60% of DOT's money goes to SIS facilities, and the crumbs go to all the other roads. So us making a case about 19 and 33 means we may get there sooner than if we don't lobby hard.
Right, and on this chart, you can see the 3 facilities that are SIS facilities, right? So, yeah. It's interesting to me, we'll see this a little bit later, but the north-south roadways are the ones that are not. Yeah, like you said, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
It's kind of unusual, yeah. So on the next slide, it was simply showing you the roadway network. If it's yellow, it's a level service D, adopted level of service standard is our target, and the blue means level service C. And those are more rural-oriented roadways or local collector type roadways that we have for level service C standard. So that just summarizes basically the whole network as far as what we're recommending. With that, because that's the end of the level of service and the adopted level of service part of this. Questions on that?
I don't have a question, but I have an observation. And you're doing a very fine job. And this is what I've been asking for the last 6 months or more. Someone that can lay this out the way that you have, great job. However, here's the problem, as I see it, is that level of service D, which you pitched to me a few slides ago, is multimodal. And I'm looking at Highway 19, which is a 2-lane highway that out of one side of our mouth we're arguing is a freight corridor, and out of the other side of our mouth we're saying, no, this is an urban road. How do we make sense of that?
Yeah.
And the fact that it's not multimodal? So no matter what you do, over the next, this is this our 10-year? Tell me again the date on this.
Say it again?
The EARs for
Yeah, you're planning out for 10 years.
10 years,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
10 years from now, 19, I'm not seeing it as a multimodal road, or do you?
Actually, with the development that'll happen, there'll be portions of it that'll definitely probably have sidewalks on it. There is, as he discussed earlier, the PD&E study, there's work being done that
I don't
with
know if
the
we
DOT.
even said that out loud here.
Yeah.
We talked about it, but I don't think
Yeah.
we told them.
Well, there's a you've heard of PD&E studies, right? It's a corridor study. It's done a preliminary planning / preliminary engineering study. There has been discussion with DOT, and TJ's been involved with it quite a bit, about getting that prioritized. A lot of effort's gone into it to where it hasn't even been a consideration at all to now it's being heavily talked about. So DOT's bought into it. It's a matter of just getting it going. And typically that process from beginning to end of construction, of actually building it, is typically promoted as 7 years, okay? Sometimes with project delays and things that happen, it takes a little longer than that, but this particular discussion has been targeting 6 years as far as the discussion goes. So it is a process. You do the project development environmental part, you get it to 30% design, 15 or 30% preliminary design, then you take it to the design phase and you hire a consultant to do that and design the thing, and after you get done, then there's right-of-way. That takes a year sometimes for right-of-way, depending on how complex it is. I don't think State Road 19 is nearly as complex as some of the commercial corridors that we've done, so maybe it doesn't take as long. And then there's the construction period and to multi-lane it, and it determines whether it should be like stay 2 lanes, be 4 lanes, be 6 lanes, whatever comes out of the study based on the demand of traffic coming over the years and stuff. So that's how they do that. Now, in developing that sort of thing, there isn't desire with the development that's going to happen to have some interaction with residential units and the commercial that'll be built and the trails and everything like that. So it's gonna, and maybe a few more bus stops. It's just gonna be, it's something that will very likely be serviced. So yeah, it'll be expected to transform into that type of roadway because, as you know, with areas from downtown moving out, as your urban area tends to grow a little bit, right? The edge of the urban boundary does tend to grow over time just from the development. And that's proof of the fact that development's starting to sneak up State Road 19 a little bit more. So yes, that is something that could very well happen. Now, keep in mind that our target goal for how we'd like to have the road operate, sometimes they don't operate at that, right? Even today, we're set level service D, but we know it's not D at peak hour, right? So what our target is, what we're striving for, what we want to try to get to, that's what the PD&E study is for, to help us get there. That's why we need to push for it so much, because today it's not there where we'd like for it to be at a level service D during the peak hour. So we need to keep pushing the PD&E and try to push with DOT and get that scheduled and get it done, because that is probably the highest priority on a roadway here in this area that we've had that had no attention or discussion or anything 3-4 years ago, right?
No attention at all.
No intention, not on anybody's radar. DOT didn't think about it at all. It not even been discussed. Total nothing. But look at the corridor with the percent trucks we have on it are super high, and that's what this is for. That's what we're doing about it. It's different to have a target level of service. It's totally different from what it's actually happening out there. Two different things, and that's the goal. We want to try to get there, whatever we can do to get there. Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, because truth be told, there's not enough money to go around to fix everything that's out there that needs to be fixed. That's true with bridges too. There's so many bridges that are deficient and functionally obsolete that they don't have enough money to fix them all right now, and they're 80 years old, 75 years old. There's just not enough money. That's why in the planning world we have a cost feasible plan, and we have our total wish list plan, basically. The cost feasible is one that most likely we'll have money for over the next so many years. So we're focused more on those type of what can we actually do with the money we have. So yeah, good question.
So I guess my question, if I were to take it further, would be, wouldn't this also affect the way that we design the road, whether it's going to be what you more or less just described, which is we bring in you mentioned sidewalks. I don't particularly enjoy strolling along a roadway with semi after semi after semi after semi. That's not exactly my preferred mode of transportation.
Yeah.
And so we're pushing for this PD&E saying this is a freight corridor. Then it would be logical to assume that then it's going to be designed to be a freight corridor. And you're a traffic guy and roadway expert, not me. But wouldn't that defeat what we're trying to accomplish?
Yes. I want to tell a quick story, because I was told until you get State Road 50 for construction, don't talk to DOT about anything but. All right, we did that 2 years ago. It got announced. Immediately, we shifted into, we need a project development and environment study of 19. And here's the reason why. If you don't have a PD&E study, you don't have anything. There is no project. Once they do that study through DOT, once they study it, they have to move into design unless they said, oh, we're choosing the no-build option. Once they choose the alternative, they've got to design it, buy the right-of-way, and construct it. So not only did we effectively get DOT District 5 here in Central Florida to kick off the PD&E study in October and to look at social impacts to all the properties, economic impacts, and environmental impacts, but part of exactly what you said is the conversation I had with the DOT team at the kickoff meeting. how do we balance that this is our umbilical cord in Groveland between the historic heart in our downtown and the economic heart around the interchange at the Turnpike? 19 is the connection of all of our neighborhoods, all of our businesses. It is the lifeblood. So how do we have an effective transportation corridor for the people that live here while handling all these trucks? So we've literally had that. And some of the things I'll point out that have already emerged from that study, and I'm going to go south to north real quick. When you start at 50 all the way to the Platte La Caja, it is so ridiculously constrained on right-of-way, we're not even clear today exactly how we're going to pull it off to put a 4-lane in there. Then you've got the bridge over Platte La Caja, and then it opens up. You've got some open area with a tree farm substantially along the east side. Trinity Lakes is a factor, but they think that from a right-of-way acquisition standpoint, environmentally, there's some lakes, there's some wetland areas and flood zone, but they can see it working up all the way through the Commerce Park. Then you have to get under US 27, which means that US 27 bridge has to be replaced. And then you've got the Turnpike, which if you'll notice, the new bridge that the Turnpike put in anticipated the 4-laning. And then we've got Bright Hill on the north side of the Turnpike, who we're going to obligate to make some improvements along 19 and O'Brien Road. So that's really happening right now in real time. And I'll say this about this PD&E study. I was involved in a previous job in the PD&E study for State Road 50 to be realigned here in downtown. That study was 2010 and 2011. And in 2026, it goes under construction. One of the reasons that we were able to get it to construction even this quickly, and I know that doesn't seem quickly, is right before I came to Groveland, I did something in my old job. We got the state to add 50 to the strategic intermodal system because of the freight running east-west from all the way from US 19, not State Road 19, US 19, over in Hernando County, all the way to the East Coast. They put it on the SIS. So now what we've done, the magic behind the scenes, is the counties of Lake and Sumter share a metropolitan planning organization. That board is made up of elected officials from Lake County's commission, Sumter County's commission, and every city. They vote on the priorities for funding. We got State Road 19 moved from number 17 to number 3 by the MPO. That's when DOT funded the study. Now, the other thing that we quietly did that we were successful is we got all of it. The PD&E, the design, the right-of-way money, and the construction money all into the MPO's 2050 plan as cost feasible, that we've identified that there is money to come into Lake County that can get this thing built within a reasonable time frame. So now we're beating the drum. Finish the study, get right into design, and plan for funding the right-of-way, and then construction. And we're competing against projects in Leesburg and Mount Dora and possibly some others in Lake County. But I will tell you, because Groveland knows how to work the system, we're being successful. So I'm excited that your questions, how to balance it for the people in Groveland while the freight is happening, that's exactly why we're doing the PD&E study. And DOT is committed. They have not given me a date, but any time now, between now and August, they will announce a big public outreach meeting for the public to come and give all comment about what 19 should be.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
And 2 points that we talked about before, TJ, level service D does not mean multimodal. It's just an example of how multimodal could work real well in a level service D environment. Level service C, D, it doesn't make, it's all about like this particular roadway you're talking about, the connectivity to the other roadways and the turnpike and everything play a role in its function and its type. And that's more why that level service D might be better for that situation. So it's about all the factors, not just that it means, well, if we do level service D, that means we got to have sidewalks on it. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It just, that was an example in the photo. Yeah. And then the other thing is that PD&E process has extensive public involvement components to it. And that's when you get to hear all the things about that particular roadway that can serve as input into what the decisions are that are being made. That process is not the type of process where decisions are made before you go to the public involvement meetings. It doesn't work like that with that. You go to those first and then you make the decisions on it and stuff like that. So it's an extensive program. So that's where you'd find out and get all the input what people in the area would like to see and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And are we good on level service and adopted level service at this point? Okay, there's another interim thing I just want to touch on real quick on the next thing. Go to the next slide. There's two Florida statutes that I just want to brief with you, so these are type of things that will come up at some point or another. I just wanted you to be aware of what these two statutes are. They're very important to understand, I think. So the first one, if you go to the next slide, this is Florida Statute 163-3182. And I just took an excerpt of it because it hits a nail on the head as far as what's going on. Proportionate fair share mitigation. What that means is it's your fair share. If you're a developer that comes in, it's the improvement that you need to make because your development's being proposed. That's the mitigation, the improvement. Mitigation is the improvement and what is fair to him as far as how much improvement they need to make or contribution to some improvement that needs to be made. And the thing is that it says here that it's limited to ensure that a development inside a transportation deficiency area means a roadway that's not doing very well. It's level service F, let's just say, for example. It's not that they're not responsible for the additional costs of eliminating those deficiencies. They're only responsible for mitigating the impacts of their development. But there is a misconception by some people out there, even some consultants sometimes will sit there and quote a statute and say, well, it's already bad out there, so we can just add traffic to it and we're good. No, you have to mitigate the impacts of what your development causes if it's impactful enough to need improvements made, right? But you're not required to go out there and solve everybody else's problems, right? The problems that were already there. So I just wanted you to understand that when we ask them to do improvements when they propose something, we're just trying to mitigate their impacts of what they're causing out there. And if they're enough of a cause, like if they're 40% of the reason why a turn lane is needed at a particular place, they probably need to pay for the whole thing, right? So, but if they're 3% of the problem of that particular issue at an intersection, we're not going to ask them to pay, on that. It's not 90%, 7% of it's because of everybody else. So you have to weigh that a little bit on what you're asking them to do.
So to give a real example, let's say the bridge over the Palat Lakaha on 19. Let's say there's a new apartment development that comes in on the south side of that, and it needs a turn lane and improvements to the roadway there. The developer should pay for that, sure, but let's say it's 500 yards down the road from that bridge. It would be unfair for us to go and say, hey, you need to pay to have that bridge redone because now you got 1,000 residents just moved in here.
So if you have a ton of residents and you need to widen a road from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road, they most likely, if they impact it enough, they would probably be paying a share of the improvement. Or in some municipalities, they have a system where you can pay for a part of the improvement to be made, and it goes into a pot of money to improve projects in the area. There's different ways to handle it on mitigation side of things. But yes, sometimes that can happen. I've had situations like in Tallahassee, there's a system where the roadway's already at level service F. It's been that way over capacity for 25 years, and I drive it every day to and from work, right? So it's like, it's over capacity, so if they exceed a certain number of trips on that road compared to the maximum capacity at that adopted level of service, they pay a number of dollars per trip as their mitigation. And that money doesn't get used to widen that 6-lane highway because it's never going to be widened, but they do the cost based upon a hypothetical 4th lane being added northbound because that's the problem in the peak hour, and it's based on that fair share of that cost. That money gets put in a pot and it's used within a certain sector of the city. And it gets applied to other improvements and everything to help them pay for some of their impacts. And sometimes like a big office complex had a $7 million mitigation fee from that Department of Agriculture doubled the size of their buildings on sites. They can move 9 sub-offices in one central location. They had to pay $1.4 million for their share of it based on that. So yeah, things like that can happen depending on the individual case by case.
Yeah, I ask because at one of the public forum meetings, someone suggested that if the situation such as the one I just described, if there's a bridge a mile down the road that's already in bad condition, is going to be made worse because now there's a development a mile away, that we, the city, should make them pay for that.
Yeah.
And we, as planning and zoning, some members past have sometimes latched on to that idea
Yeah.
that we can turn the screws.
Right.
And I ask because I want us to have a full understanding of what is reasonable and what is not.
Yeah. Depending on the impact and the size of development and how many trips it puts on the road, how much they pay or they don't pay, or whether it's fair or unfair, all those decisions are weighted after the analysis and then discussed and determine whether or not that's a fair thing to do. But you cannot ask them to, if they're not impacting it enough, you can't ask them to replace the bridge, because that means you're taking care of everybody else's deficiencies and it might be deemed as unfair. But to have a straight up 100% answer one way or the other based right now, without doing the analysis, you can't really do that. You have to wait until you do the analysis and then you answer those questions.
And I'm going to give a couple
Yeah.
of real scenarios. First, a couple what ifs, just for fun. This is not happening, so do not react to what I'm saying. But Cherry Lake Tree Farm is technically annexed in the city of Groveland. And they did that years ago as a what-if safety net, that they have entitlements should they ever need them. We'd prefer they stay a tree farm forever, and right now, they're doing great. But what if they were to develop? Well, DOT's right now doing a PD&E study. The city of Groveland would ask them to do a proportionate share agreement toward widening 19, or what's needed at the intersection of Cherry Lake Road and 19. Are they going to be responsible for more turn lanes? Should they have to put a roundabout in? Who knows what we may work out with DOT, but the point is, staff talks to DOT regularly, and we would coordinate that. That's a what if. There's another what if, and that's the Villa City PUD. It's 2,500 acres on US 27, a CIS facility at Villa City Road. Well, we mentioned to DOT, and I do this regularly, is when are you kicking off the PD&E study of 27? Because if you all, DOT, don't define what you're expecting 27 to be, which would be a 6-lane, then how can we get Villa City committed to pay for something if you haven't defined what that is? So we're already thinking before Villa City comes out of the ground, because there's no developer involved. It's just a landowner trying to sell 2,500 acres. So we're engaging DOT on that one. A real one that's happening now. Once you go under the turnpike on 19, look to the left, site work has begun on Bright Hill Phase 1. Their mitigation for Phase 1 on 19 is more than a half a mile, about 3/4 of a mile of turn lane configurations, northbound and southbound. That's their mitigation with DOT and us for Phase 1. However, their Phase 2 takes them on up to O'Brien Road. Now we're talking with them in DOT, what's the plan to widen O'Brien Road? What's the intersection of O'Brien and 19 look like? And we have 2 intersections of O'Brien and 19. One at the Commerce Park, and then O'Brien winds over 27, over the turnpike, and back to 19. At that intersection, as you get closer to Howie in the Hills, they're already either going to be obligated to build a roundabout or a traffic signal automatically on Phase 2. And then we're looking beyond that, okay, Phase 3, if you generate trips and 19's still not widened, you're going to have to pay into the widening of 19 at that point. So these are real things that we think about that are part of concurrency management for transportation.
Thank you.
All right, before I go to the next statute, I'm just going to ask this question. Well, sometimes I've heard statements in various jurisdictions, can we just limit our growth? Can we just stop growing? Or I could have if I set it at level service D or C, if I set it at C, can I limit growth? The traffic happens. It's not going to change it because of level service, but based on those two thoughts, this next statute will probably clear that up a little bit. So a local government may not prevent a single applicant from proceeding after the applicant has satisfied its proportionate share requirement, which means the mitigation, if the applicant has satisfied all other local government development requirements for the project. So there are certain entitlements that they do have to be able to build if they want to build in their property, as long as they're meeting all the rules and they mitigate their impacts. So it's just something important to keep in mind in any situation when the subject matter comes up that, you know, they can still do it even if it's on a level service F roadway. They can still do it. They mitigate their impacts. Now, if a level service D on a road, say, is the current level of service, and that's your adopted level of service, and they come on the road and it makes it an E, and it throws them above, and they can't get it back to say they can get it back to a D, but no, the level service standard is a C, well, they just have to mitigate their own impacts to get it back to the pre-existing conditions, right? You know, level service C, if it was level service C, it wouldn't make any difference. They just have to mitigate their part of it. They're not going to back it up and say, you got to get to level service C to be able to build. No, that's not it, right? Because then you'd be taking care of other people's deficiencies that violates the other statute, right? So this one just basically says if they mitigate, they're willing to mitigate, and they meet all the requirements, then they're allowed to proceed. And that's something that's not always understood. Now, back up even further, obviously, it's a zoning issue. If you don't want people to build and you do conservation or something, that limits what you can build there, right? So it boils down sometimes to the zoning level on what they're allowed, but they're meeting the zoning requirements, they're mitigating, and they meet all the local government, they're allowed to proceed. So that's just something I wanted to clarify. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's go to the last part here. So this is the official term that we have in our transportation language. It's called Traffic and Currency System Management Database. I'm going to change the title of this just for the sake of our conversation. Go to the next slide, and we're going to say this instead. How do we manage our future traffic growth? And I like to think of this as how do we monitor and manage our future traffic growth? That's really what it is. And we did something new here for the city of Groveland that they didn't have before, and also do this elsewhere as well, but it's a very common thing, actually. It's just that more people could do this, and you'll understand why in a minute. But I'm going to take an excerpt of a much larger spreadsheet that we use to monitor and manage our traffic growth. On the next slide, I've hidden some columns, but I wanted to point out the gist of what we're doing here. This is actually from the management database that we've put together for county and local collector roads. And you can see this is the complete chart. This is not state roads, this is county and local collector roads. These are the roads that we have inside the city of Groveland city limits. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 roads listed on here with a couple of different segments under each one. And I'm going to draw your attention to the column that has green in it, because that column says this is the available capacity that's left at the adopted level of service today. This has been updated with FDOT's recent count database from 2025, released a month and a half ago or so. So this is updated now. We have finalized this document, and I can show you here. This is what would be published. See how large the spreadsheet is. But we have more columns out here with other things that add numbers into these columns. So it's a very comprehensive, detailed list of different columns and roadway types and number of lanes and urban and rural and different things that we have in there that us professionals, when we do the analysis, need to be able to see, right? To analyze the projects that we look at and review the information. But the green is there because the numbers that we have on all of our county roads on there are in the green, are very much in the green. We have a lot of available capacity on there. If you think about it, our local roads are not super congested out there, our local county roads. This is state roads, right? So there's a lot of capacity here. So you can see here, we've got plenty of time ahead of us before we exceed the capacity at the adopted level of service. That's real important. The capacity If you just say capacity, you're talking about when things break down, that'd be like level service F. But we're talking about capacity at the adopted level service target that we set. Okay, so it's a different number. And here, so the next column over, not the next slide yet, but the next column that you see to the right of the green, it says approved unbuilt project trips. What that means is the planning department has approved projects based on all the review, and then they met all the rules and everything, and they got approval, but they haven't built yet. That column has numbers of vehicles in it that are not on the roadway yet. They're approved already. They're going to be there when they build. When they build, that traffic will show up on that segment. And then if you look at the next slide, you'll look, there's another column of green. No, you skipped it. Go back. Go back, please. Thank you. Okay, there we go.
So close.
All right. And I love you, Alan. So the remaining available capacity after you take the existing plus that column of approved unbuilt project trips gives you the total there. And we can see we're still going to be under capacity by adding in the approved unbuilt development that we know is coming because they approved it, right? Unless they just decide not to build and their DO expires or whatever, you know, they don't end up building. But they are approved and this traffic's coming. And the reason we do this, keep in mind the Lake County Congestion Management System tables that we talked about, they give us the picture for the existing. That's their purpose. The objective is met with the stuff and the, you know, what it's used for. It's great, okay? But we are taking it a step further because it takes a little bit of research and looking at all the studies and doing a little bit of estimating on our own to come up with the distribution on all the approved projects, working with Dwayne and his staff to make sure we have all the information correct and we're thorough and complete with it all to figure out what that column is for the approved unbuilt project trips. Therefore, we look ahead and we don't see any problems ahead, so great. We know that. We can monitor and manage our traffic growth and see we got a long ways to go before we have problems. Which of those segments in the last green column looks like we're the closest at exceeding capacity in the future? It's the Villa City Road from 27 to Simon Brown Road. We've got 119 remaining available capacity, right? So that's kind of like, oh, okay, we need to keep that in mind. You know, we got Villa City development and stuff coming. We know we're going to have, you know, we know that we're not far away, right? Okay. So now, and I want to point out one thing on this chart. See the yellow number way to the right? The information that's available in the county roads, that's percent trucks. It's going to be orange or yellow if it's over 10% because that's considered to be a significant percentage of trucks. So we're going to yellow those in if you see that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the next slide here, and we're going to look
Dave,
at...
if you don't mind, on
Oh,
Villa,
yes, sorry, go back,
Villa
please.
City, I just want to mention something. That's the one road that after Dave and his team built this, I said, you know what's going to be helpful, Villa City in particular? Anybody that uses Villa City Road, what's unique about Villa City Road to anybody local here in Groveland? It happens to also be, it's curvy, it's real curvy, but it also happens to be our boundary with whom?
Mascot. That's what I was
Exactly.
going to ask, if those numbers have the other side of the road.
That's
the
what we're now
mascot's
working
gonna
toward
add to
is
that.
exactly that.
That was where I was,
Yeah.
that's funny. I was
So
thinking that
that's a
too.
very unique situation in this particular thing is that other cities and counties that might abut this location that do throw traffic on these roads, that's not in there yet.
And then my other question on top of that is because technically Villa City has weight limits, which is not enforced at all. So there
Yes.
shouldn't even be that many trucks supposedly on that road either.
Yeah.
So,
The type of roadway is narrow.
yeah, oh, it's rural.
It's
If
not
you-
as
if you-
built structurally sound as a lot of the other
That north
roads.
side is considered rural in our mapping.
Good point. Very
So-
good point. Yeah. So that's the local roads. Not a bad picture, though, overall, right? Okay, so let's go to the state roads and see how those look. This is the existing, I'm going to point out here, all the state roads. You see a State Road 1933, State Road 50, Turnpike, US 27. These are all the segments listed on here as we have them. And they're broken down pretty much, you know, like the Lake County does. And it's a good thing that we're not too different from Lake County on all this stuff, okay? Because if we were, that might create some issues possibly. So we landed on a place that's very close to what they were, in our opinion, and we agreed with exception of two segments, right? So in this particular one, let's look at the existing available capacity there in the middle where you see mostly green and a couple of reds. Today, this is the way there's one thing, there's perception and everything, and then there's the actual engineering side of things and the planning side of things where we have to define things based upon and we have to think about those things together. Yeah, we know this might look like but we know it's problematic out there a couple days a week or whatever, but we know this because we live here and all that, but this is what we follow. We have to have some criteria and some things that are followed during the traffic studies that are done so we can be consistent with the way that we do things when we analyze the traffic and everything. So if you feel like something here doesn't look quite right based on my own experience, this is taken from a more objective and as close as we can get to what is defensible if I had to testify in court or something. You know what I mean? It's something that we can rely on as usable. And believe me, when projects come in and do this, all the consultants pretty much don't disagree with this. We don't have arguments with them when we think it should be this. But once in a blue moon, and it's happened even here, they'll say, well, what do you think about this being our maximum capacity at that adopted level of service for this reason? And I agreed with them one time, right? So it happens. Those adjustments can happen during the process of a traffic study, and if it's legitimate enough, we'll change the table to accommodate that sort of thing. But, it was that's just what happens in this. So existing-wise, we have a lot of green there, but we've got a segment on State Road 33, which is Anderson Road to the south, that is over capacity because the level service standard on that road is what it is, so it has a lower capacity at that level service C. But if it was a level service D, maybe it would be okay, right? But no, we're doing level service C, and that's our target. And we want that to be our target for that particular roadway. It's got a rural feel to it. It's where the speed limit changes basically from 50 to 40, right? From 40 to 50, from the urban to the rural. So that's the reason there. And you got State Road 19, which is north of US 27 up to 455. And that's not really a surprise. That's C as well. So that's our target for that area because right now that's a rural segment. Maybe that changes in the future, or maybe this gets adjusted the next round or something like that. But for now, our target's level service C. So that's what we have the PD&E study coming up for. And you'll see something even more amazing here in the next slide, but we're not going to go there yet. Notice in the last column, for example, we have all the truck factors and how high those are. I mean, look at that. It's ridiculous. This is DOT information. DOT information that we pulled from their records of their count stations.
Dave, what's a normal state roads truck factor?
Well, normal, there's no such thing as normal on state roads, but typical would be anywhere from, probably 5 to 20% maybe. It depends on the area you're in. When you go to the northern United States, it could be 50. On interstates, it's crazy, but this is very high for a city of Groveland area. This is unbelievable. This is like crazy high for this area, and that's why it's in yellow and everything. And
that segment in particular on 50, that's down in the middle, between 19 and 33, right here.
Oh yeah, 40%. That's your choke point, your bottleneck, right? That's where they got to go through to get where they got to go, right? And then they split up after that. It's crazy, right? So let's go back to the green column there and the column to the right. Check this out on the state roads. These are approved but yet unbuilt development trips that have not been on the road yet. Look at those numbers. You have plenty of development that's been approved that hasn't built yet, and those numbers you would expect would jack up the numbers of the available capacity column, right? So then you go to the next slide, which adds those two columns up. And the column that Alan's going to highlight here in a second is going to show you which ones go over capacity when you add in the development trips that haven't been built yet.
Good thing we're doing a PD&E study of 19 with DOT.
That's the first thing off of the top of our heads is, look, we've been pushing this State Road 19, and I will tell you something. I have been completely impressed with TJ to have the forethought to jump on this thing and the time he did to lead up today where it's a serious conversation now to get that done, because that's the foresight. We didn't have this foresight on this particular chart back then. He figured it out and got the ball rolling with the trip to Tallahassee and everything, and I'm upset that he didn't visit me while I was there. But that's the way it crumbles. Yeah, so there's other segments on here that maybe perhaps Lake County, nobody has ever talked about what's going to go on in the future after the development that we've approved. That doesn't count the ones we have in the process right now that haven't been approved yet. These are only the ones that have been approved. And this is what's happening. So what does this tell us now that we can manage and monitor and manage our future traffic growth? It says, wow, State Road 50, we have a couple things to start looking at for the future that maybe perhaps because of this we can get started earlier on it. And maybe at least TJ and I, when they get the final review of our final draft, which I think is final, but TJ and Dwayne are going to review this, and then they're going to decide, okay, we accept this as final. Then there's going to be a time where this is implemented. But that's when TJ and I, on our FDOT coordination calls, will plant the seeds on what we found out through this study that we did. Says these are the areas that we see problems with in the future. I want to bring it up to you now because we'll need to start working on a plan in the future to try to help us out on this, right? And this is what this enables us to get the ball rolling a little sooner, like he did with State Road 19. And if we did this 3 years ago or whenever TJ started working on this, this is what it would have showed on State Road 19, and that's why we're getting the PD&E study. That's why it's such a high priority, because bam, your whole city on State Road 19 is basically having an issue here on future capacity, right? We also have on there the US 27 segment from 19 to 561, which is over as well, and that's something we would bring up with them and say, hey, it's on your radar, we're having to deal with this, we know it's coming, we need to partner, talk about funding partnerships, all that, whatever, and start thinking about what we want to do to try to resolve these sooner rather than later. Otherwise, if we didn't have this, we'd find out later after it's already happened and things are bad. Just like State Road 19 could have been now if we'd done nothing about it, right? It would be getting bad and we wouldn't do it. So this is what the benefit is from managing our traffic growth. And the number of streets we have here, I showed you on both pages of the slide. It's not like it's an extreme number of streets, right? But it's very detailed on the stuff that we've done to come up with this that allows us to do that. And we would update this probably every 3 months, maybe 2 months, depending on how much development's been approved. We'll update this and keep it going to where the consultants that do studies here will use this chart within the city limits for the studies that they submit. And outside the city limits, they use the Lake County tables. So we're taking charge of our area within the city limits now, as far as how we want to monitor and manage our traffic growth, rather than relying on non-Groveland entities to do that for us. But we want to take a step further so we can figure things out and problems in the future that we might encounter. So if you go to the last slide there, I just wanted to show you, this is the future volume to maximum service volume. That means the future volume compared to the adopted level of service capacity. And you can see the chart that we just looked at would match what's here. Everything that exceeds 100% of our adopted level of service is in red. Everything that's getting close, it's over 90%, but not quite there, is in the yellow. And there's one area, you can see down there where it is. And then there's under, which is fine, that those segments are doing fine. But it gives you a picture that it's state roads.
Yeah, every red road's a state road.
Yeah. And this is the point where I would open it up for final questions and everything with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope that this information not only helps you with reviewing the comp plan and EAR amendments and all that, but for future things that you run into here in Groveland for other issues that deal with traffic and level of service. Hopefully it was helpful.
Very much,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes.
Extremely helpful. Wheels are spinning on getting how we can incorporate this into some of the larger developments that we see. This spreadsheet information.
They will have to use this when they do their analysis and stuff as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you've been at plenty public meetings, and community members come out and make themselves heard.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
And it's helpful to have real math, real data to say,
Yeah.
here's truly the impact, here's how it's being mitigated, here's how it's being paid for, and let's move on.
The beauty of the last couple of slides is now you have more ammunition to go to DOT to discuss these things further in advance. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, thank you.
And I got to tell you guys, the fact that we have regular coordination meetings with DOT, it is so awesome, because they're like, if every city did what you all do, if just taking the initiative to communicate with us, we could help them too. But it's literally us helping ourselves by simply communicating with the state agency.
Yeah, we have a real good relationship with them. My standpoint, after doing this for 40 years, it's one of the top tier.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all of your work, both of you, especially TJ, this isn't your only hat. So thank you for your presentation and all your work on this.
Just so everyone knows, we included the presentation in the email that we sent out. So if you have to go back and kind of look over again, you have that opportunity as well.
Yeah, now I have the context. I can understand the spreadsheet. Yeah. Okay. At this time, we will have closing comments. Do we have any comments from the public? Please state your name and address so we know who you are.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. My name's Keith Keogh, 16738 Hunt Island Road, Groveland, Florida. Proud citizen of the community, and as a citizen, I speak to you tonight. I came to say something else, but now you've really got me wound up over there. So let me just start out with how many? We have 7, right? We're missing 3? Are we missing 3 tonight? So 40%. So are we on tape so I can talk to him on tape? We'll go with roads first. You know, great facts, great things. But, well, let's start out by saying, hey, point your finger at me. Can you all point your finger at me? And go ahead, point your finger at me. And say, you're just a cook. Go ahead, you're just a cook, and it's all your fault. So we know. And I'm going to say that I'm a firm believer, if you're comfortable, you're not moving forward. So there's some things that aren't going to be comfortable. We as a city, a while back, and I love FDOT. We're talking decades and decades up here on stuff. You are the planning and zoning board, not just zoning. Planning and zoning board. And when we have people come before us and talk about where they want to do things and put things up here, I want just to remember, we're never going to build another big bridge across the river down here. The north's always going to be the north. The south is always going to be the south. When you get something in front of you, like where do we put a city hall? And we're going to have 2,900 houses out at Bright Hill and 7,500 houses at Villa City, which is more houses than we have right here, right now. I want you to think in your mind, do all those people need to come down 19? Or should all of our commercial development and all of our development that creates traffic be out on 27 because you have everybody north of Bible Camp Road can access 27 through O'Brien, through Villa City, through Wilson Lake Parkway, there's many, many ways to get down there. If you're coming this way, you go down Cherry Lake Road to 19, or you come down 19. So we need to change the paradigm. And I'm bringing up that real quick because what I did come to talk about was the new property tax law and how that's going to change our paradigm. Now, I've heard, well, don't worry about it till after it comes in, but when the new law comes in and you are the planning and zoning board and the advisors to the council, remember that houses are now going to become a liability. Remember, our old paradigm was rooftops create revenue. Well, we've known in the past couple of years that we lose 13 cents on every dollar on everything, so now we're going to lose more. Commercial and apartments, those things that don't have homestead exemption or where the money's got to come in, we're going to lose $3.5 million in 2027, 28, and 6.1 million in the following. Now remember, our whole ad valorem tax is 16 million. So we're going to lose a significant amount of revenue. So we're going to have to switch a little bit from concentrating on rooftops, and we're giving out what do you call it, reservations. I'd truly like to see reservations for commercial. And I didn't see a lot of that up here earlier, and that makes me very uncomfortable. What keeps you up at night, Chef? I'll tell you, what keeps me up at night is, help me with this, TJ. Am I right? 35%, how many highways do we have in Groveland? We have 50.
33, 50, 19, 27, and Turnpike.
And Turnpike. And 35% of all the traffic deaths in Groveland are where?
On state roads.
On 19.
Yeah, on 19 in particular.
8-mile stretch. 8-mile stretch. You go down and start counting the crosses down there. So we can talk traffic all day, but it's our fault. We put in a strategic plan, we put in a land use plan that said, whenever development comes in, it's a town center, they got to have commercial where that is to keep people off the roads. We had Cypress, what is this Cypress one out here? Bluffs and all these commercial, and nobody built the commercial. It's wide open space. Putting people back on where? That one puts them back on Villa City Road. If we're gonna really take this serious and really get things right, we've really got to take our land use plan seriously. And when these builders come in and say, we're going to build this as a town center, you don't build it until you have the commercial to go with it. Does that make sense? I guess not.
Yes.
The next thing, let me go to wastewater treatment. Who's got a calculator that can put stuff in real quick?
I'm ready, Mayor. I'm ready.
Okay, how much is the new plant that we just put up here?
The one we're building now,
The new one at Villa City, the new?
we estimate
North
that
Plant?
to be 95 million.
95 million, and with interest on that loan, 2%, 1%? Yeah, so like 104 million. Okay, let's put in $104 million. And let's divide that by $13,900, which is our impact fee for wastewater treatment. So how many houses do we need to pay for that? Oh, excuse me, how many million gallons is that? One to start with? 1.5. 1.5. How many houses is that? What does it say? 79?
7,500.
You lost.
7,500 houses to pay for that. Growth pays for growth. We have 8,500 houses now, not including Mascot, and we have 2.6 million. So do we have the capacity? Will those houses pay for that new plant? Absolutely not. We're going to get about 60% in and have to build another $90 million. This is becoming a real, what I call a Ponzi scheme. Whoever's going to be at the end has a problem. We have to become more creative on how we're looking at these things. And you are our advisors. I mean, I'm sorry that we had both of these together, because we could have spent all day just on wastewater. But I am going to say that we have a very good young man over here that's getting ready to put a symposium together to bring all this back so we can see how we can get out of a hole. Right now, I don't have 60, I have $72 million in utility debt, right? 72 million?
62 that I've been involved in.
But overall, because what we've done is, and it wasn't you, we've taken loans from 2007 or 2006 and 2017 and what do you call it? Refinanced them?
Basically, yeah.
You know, $8 or $10 million at a time and not paying for them until next year. We started them in 2021 and we keep putting this out. So the question should be, how are we going to pay for it? When are we going to pay for it? You know, when are we going to pay for it? This year, we have $465,000 in debt service. And then next year it'll be $3 million. And the following year, $4 million, because we have loans that have been taken out that don't start. I need you guys to, you're very nice, but I need you to be good. I need you to start asking these hard questions on what's the capacity, how are we going to pay for it, does growth pay for growth? Are we going to have to add more onto the water bill? We got another 10%. Is that going to take care of it? That's what the symposium's going to tell us. And then, how many houses do we have to build a year to pay for it? How many houses do we have to pay? I mean, right now, I was told 500, right? And this year, we have 175. How many houses do we need a year to pay for it without going under? Yeah, we can have these builders give us $7 million. $7 million in impact has to be applied immediately, correct? We're trying to change that. So you don't get to save that for a rainy day. You take 7% of the loan down, you still got the rest. I need you to start protecting this town from the financial situations that we could get in. With less money coming in, with, $6 million out of 16, with everything else that we've got going, the hard questions have got to be asked. And what can we do? What can you do as planning? Is please remember where all the volume's going to be. Please remember where the traffic goes. And let's keep as much off of 19 as we can. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking with your presentation, sir, that we're putting in a light at Cherry Lake, which we need one. We had a fatality just a couple weeks ago, helicopter out. We had another crash this last week. But and then the next one is Bible camp, right? So how many 70-foot semis will get through? Remember, we have to do it for safety. We got to get the traffic off 19. How is that going to work when we have 4 lanes? I don't know, but I know those 4 lanes will dump into 2 lanes on 33. So I'm just here to beg that we now start taking it down a couple more layers. There's not anybody on this panel that isn't smarter than all of us in the council, because you didn't run for council, but. But you each, tremendous researchers, builders, common sense people, realtors, you are here to advise us, and we need to take it down another couple layers. And boy, as a member of the council, even though I'm speaking as a citizen tonight, I would certainly love that when we have presentations on these things that come up with big financial issues, that somebody from one of you guys is here, that comes here at night, and especially if it's a 4-3 vote or a 5-2 vote, to say these were the 2 sides of the issues so that we can try to delve into it more. Because your advice is so powerful for us, and there's some people that's all they've seen. Some people don't even read, they go by what you all say. So I don't want to say the future of the city is in your hands, but it is. There's some big things coming in this city. There's some big things coming down here. Changes announced probably next month. But we have to get further down into the weeds. I mean, the thing tonight, if we had one whole thing just on traffic, the next thing is, well, how does that apply? How do we make sure that where do we put how do we change these PUDs? How do we change these things? And remember, as these builders come in, please remember, houses are a liability. Density is no longer our friend. In my opinion, it never was. But now Density, those houses don't pay for themselves, commercial pays. So when you get into your edge that you're doing, your agriculture and all that, that's not a liability to the city. That doesn't require a lot of services. We need to save the money for the people we got for services. Make sense? I certainly appreciate your time, and I certainly appreciate whoever's going to come and represent the committee at the council meetings when it comes up. But I think you should stay up and not sleep as much at night as the rest of us. Since you're our advisory committee, we should be sleeping, and you should be advising us. So thanks for all you do. All kidding aside, this is the most important group that you can't imagine. The future really is in your hands, and so thanks.
Thank you. Oops. All right, seeing no other public comment, do we have any comments from our board members?
Things that I brought up to Dwayne this week was the workshop where that was brought up to have either the chair or the vice chair represent for 3 minutes when there was something that was a split vote scenario. And one of those things is that if we take that on, you're trusting all of us to what we're talking about today in our room to bring that and those discussions to council for those 3 minutes during some of these deeper discussions and dives. So I had that on my agenda to bring up. One of the other things that was also discussed was the Florida Statute 166.041, which it applies to us for procedures for adoption of ordinances affecting zoning. So I've asked Dwayne to put that next month on our agenda so that can not only be discussed to council but to us as well, since we start before they would see any of that, and that would be that 2 advertisement and public hearings. So just mindful of that it was on my, like, I was planning on bringing it up before Chef did today too, so you know.
Okay. I have, Michael, do you have anything? I have, well, I get a lot of questions from people about what's happening in Groveland. And it's very difficult to keep up with all of it. And as this committee, I sometimes feel that we are left in the dark on what's going on, and that we have to go search and make calls and go to meetings to try to know what's happening. And what's happening on this street right now, since I'm in construction and I see what's there, I know what's happening, but there's never been any email to the planning committee saying, hey, this is happening, this development that didn't have to go to planning and zoning got approved, this roadway improvement is underway, et cetera. So I take the note from Mayor, and I would ask if we can think on how some of the developments and larger improvements could be better communicated to the committee. It would be helpful, because I don't like responding with, I don't know.
Are you
It's
talking
not a-
about
it's
those
not a good
projects
look.
that
It's
don't
not
go
a
through
good
the
look.
public hearing process, more of those administrative projects that, like site plan applications or certain things like that, that don't go through this process that you want to be aware of as a committee?
Well, yeah, I mean, for example, we just went through this elaborately detailed spreadsheet on how much more can be approved to go on certain sections of road, how many project trips can happen. Well, if administratively things are being approved that add to that we don't know about, that number is getting smaller and we're not aware, right? And I'm not suggesting that that happens a lot. I'm just trying to take another step here in improvement of our knowledge of what's going on. I have a small child. I'm going to have another small child any day now. Making it out to all the city council meetings, it's not going to happen for me. It's just not. So me going to those even the things that do go to public hearing with city council, I'm not aware of all that stuff. And so just think on that, how as a planning committee, we could be better informed, even if the response is, hey, all the information is here, Zach, just go here, that might be helpful, but that's my comment for
From the
this
planning
evening.
side, I don't want to speak for TJ and his department. From the planning side, we do have our interactive development activity map that we update pretty regularly. I think from a staff level, me and Alec can work together on a monthly basis, sending you a link to that access, like, hey, here's some upcoming projects, here's a new project that is going through the planning process between now and approval, just to get you an idea of what's going on around the city. We do have it on the website, just so you know, but sometimes people forget, but maybe we can start sending those emails out so you kind of get an update on those current projects that's going on.
Yeah, and the development map is great for the average person that's just going on there every now and then and, oh, what's new? But for us here every month, I don't think that we should have to go searching for information to bring to this meeting. I think that needs to be teed up and say, hey, in July, we got these roadway improvements happening, we have this happening, we have this happening, and it's a one-pager, two-pager, whatever. And I know that adds some administrative burden to staff, but I do think if we're tasked with the future, as the mayor just put on our shoulders, let's disseminate some information so that when we do come here, we're a little bit better prepared. And we've already made a big step by sending out the agenda a week early with all the attachments. I mean, that's very helpful. I don't know about everybody on the committee, but I know Robin is even more detailed in reviewing than myself. But I read all that stuff, and I can come to this meeting knowing what what the information is, what questions I have. So that's all. Think on it. And
To your point, Chair, we will make sure you're invited to the State Road 19 PD&E event the DOT will do. We absolutely want you engaged and be ambassadors for Groveland. You should have heard about our streetscape project finally going under construction after a couple of years of planning this one. And I do want to say for everybody, because we want to really hit the community, making them aware, construction starts this fall on the 4-lane around our downtown. It's a big deal, so we'll definitely be communicating. We want this group to have all the information.
thank you. Yeah. All right. Does staff have anything for us?
So good evening, this is Alan Booker once again. Just a quick comment. I know for the capital improvement project like we had recently, I believe we may be hiring a new capital improvement project person. So maybe they'll be able to forward this information, and maybe we can talk also with CRA becoming development director to see, because if he's in the know, he can share this information. Here's a quick highlight. This is happening, because I believe this just got approved recently, for the pavers down the street. So, I mean, I only knew because I listened to the city council, but I think like we could probably get also a quick highlight and we can share with the rest of the team. So that might be a solution. And also to add something to all the excellent point that our mayor made, like we need to one of the things we're trying to work on in this comp plan too is to look at solution that will bring more fiscal resilience. So we're looking at, when we talked about there's going to be a new policy for strategic allocation that if you reach a certain threshold, we have to prioritize, set aside for non-residential, this is commercial development. We did not have a policy before, so that's something that we added in there, and it's already been forwarded to our attorney for review. We also looked at what other, if homes are going to be, essentially it's kind of having an HOA and half your people don't pay their fees, and this could be the reality starting in November. So we have to look at what policy we can put in place. So this is something we're actively working with our attorney to see what can be defendable, what we can do legally, and then if we have a policy, and then moving forward, if so-and-so has, say, agriculture, and they say, hey, I want to do this residential development. What can we do in place? If there's a policy that says you can only do non-residential, and if it's defendable, we can do this. And any applicant that comes forward, we can say, unless you don't meet this criteria, sorry, we can't even accept your application. So we can look into, we've been looking into policies like this. And also to touch on something from our interim city manager, tonight we really didn't focus on transportation and the cars, but yet there's another aspect that we've been working on, but it requires to do a mobility study, which then lead to a mobility plan, and then you would have mobility fees. And so the FDOT, they have this really cool guide where you can look, instead of going to A, B, C, D, F like they have for road, they go from 1 to 4. 1 is kind of like first place. It's like the elderly, everybody can walk, it's safe. So if you think, say, in front of Waterside, there's no sidewalks. You would never take your kids on a stroller. It's super dangerous. So that would be like a 4. That's what you don't want. But the thing that's really good about a mobility fee versus the standard impact fee, you're just going to modify the impact that you cause where you live. Where something we've heard a lot during the community feedback is, hey, I live at Trinity, or I'm in my neighborhood, I can't go out. There's no trails, there's no sidewalks, and this is where a mobility plan can lead to that solution, that when a developer comes, they're going to pay a portion of that money, and we can strategically use that money. It can be prioritized by our council and planning and zoning to see this money's going to go here. We're going to connect those sidewalks, or we're going to create a new trail, but you got to have it in place. But first, before you go to anything, we have to have this policy that we're going to recommend a mobility study first, because you can't charge people if you don't. You need to back it up with real data and proof. So where we would be going with this is, like Mascot actually did one a few years ago. They did a mobility study so they could adopt their mobility plan. And they, according to their city manager, there's a good return on investment, because now you can use this money. I know there's something we talked briefly with TJ, because I know he's also interested in doing a mobility plan. So that could be, like I said, a potential solution for us, because, like I said, developers, they just pay where they cause the extra traffic, but we want to look at other solutions than just only cars and get people to walk. And talking about our current future land use and the zoning, like, we have those towns, and we've seen at Cypress Bluff, they come in, a lot of times they don't want to do the commercial downtown, and so that's an area too that we need to strengthen our policies to say. I think it's something we had discussed with our interim city manager, is perhaps the first floor of any town core is going to have to be non-residential, and then you can do maybe residential at the top. But at least in those areas, in certain corridors that we've heard, like I know our mayor's been very strong to say, hey, on 27, we really need to protect this corridor. So that's why we're going to have policy on it too. If you're on 27, say, something we're still considering is perhaps the first 500 feet, if you have frontage on 27, you have to be non-residential, because we want to protect those areas, because if you have traffic, that could be a future site for employment centers. So I think those are policy that we've been paying attention to. And so I think it's trying to see what are the best future land use that can produce the best yield, so we have essentially, we're getting tax revenue so we can sustain our city in the long term. So just wanted to add to this, because all the points our mayor said are extremely important, and I think we're taking it very seriously on our end. And it's going to come back to you, because eventually we're going to come back to all those policies and say, okay, this is where we come up, we've checked with our attorneys, and this is what it's going to accomplish. And I think this is where this will be the improvement in this year. And like I said several times, and year was just, are you compliant with the state? We're really moving more toward a full-blown comp plan is essentially what we're doing. And I think those policies, they're going to be good for the city, but they need to be in it, because if it's not in our comp plan, we don't have something to guide us. So it needs to be in there. So I just wanted to add this to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. All right. Any other staff comment? Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Those in favor, say
Aye.
aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned at